Has anybody ever needed a win like the Royals did last night, snapping an 8-game losing streak the night before they get set to announce their stadium plans down at Crown Center, not technically Washington Square Park. It was Michael Garcia racing home on a game-ending wild pitch as the Royals beat the Orioles last night to snap the 8-game slide. Did you stay up for it, Mark? Were you rocking and rolling, big guy?
I did. I was going back and forth between Royals and NBA playoffs, which I know was a little bit odd, but I was doing both. But I thought the Royals were going to blow it again. It happened in the 8th inning. They blew the lead. They were up 4-3. Then it's 5-4, and then they somehow come back and win it.
Well, you know what? You act like you're disappointed in yourself when you say that you thought they were going to lose the game. They had lost 8 games in a row, Mark, in impressive fashion during this 8-game losing streak. So that was completely normal to feel that way. But we said it yesterday, right when the show wrapped up. We found out that today at 10 o'clock in the morning, the Royals would be announcing their stadium plans with Governor Mike Kehoe and Mayor Quinton Lucas. And after talking to some people throughout the day, I reported on my social media pages, Facebook and X, that the Royals are not going to be in Washington Square Park. They're going to be in a portion of Crown Center, kind of like I guess you'd call it the southeast part of Crown Center, more or less, just kind of north of the Catholic Church that is down there in that part of town. And it will be much more of a revitalization and activation of the entire area, with obviously the ballpark being there as kind of the hub of the entire operation. So that's what I started hearing yesterday. You have had some people in TV news note that the stadium's not going to be in Washington Square Park anymore, but they haven't really told you where. That's where I'm hearing it's going to be, and that's what the announcement is going to be coming up today at 10 o'clock. So that'll be during Keatsman's show. If anything else of note comes out of it, of course, we'll get it to you right here on 95.7 FM. I did find it interesting last week when the 4th District at-large councilman Crispin Rea was a vote for present on the deal for Kansas City to fork over $600 million to the team. And it didn't make any sense to me outside of he just wants to kind of ride the fence and be like, well, I don't want to be seen as anti-stadium, but I don't want to be a pro-stadium guy, so if I want to run for mayor, I'll just sit on the fence here and do my thing. And then Nathan Willett was the only no vote. Everybody else voted yes. I wonder now if in hindsight, maybe he was just ticked off that there was another move as to where the technical stadium itself was going to be. I don't know, but it makes a little more sense now, considering everybody was talking about Washington Square Park, which is 5 acres. Now, what happens to the homeless there? Are they doing a little rally and happy dance this morning that they get to keep their park and their benches and things like that? Or does that become part of the build-out for the Royals in and around Crown Center? I don't know. I guess we'll find out today. And that's going to be John Sherman. That will be Quinton Lucas. And that will be Mike Kehoe, the governor. Now, something else I keep thinking about, we know that ingress-egress has been a concern, to put it mildly, for that part of Kansas City. And it is for me as well. And it becomes more of a concern the further east you go on Pershing. Now you're going to the other side of Pershing Road. Now you might say, hey, getting off a 71 highway, they can figure out ways to get to that side of Crown Center easier from 71 highway, say coming down, 22nd Street maybe, or 27th Street to the south. There's going to have to be major build out there that I would imagine the state would be kicking into. And then what do you do coming off of 35? And there's really no good way directly from the south to get there. I mean, you're not going to kind of snake through the plaza and whatnot. That would take you forever. So I still have concerns and questions about that, but it looks like it's all but a done deal. The other thing is, what is the state going to kick in? Governor Kehoe is going to be on my show tomorrow at 8 o'clock. And as you may have heard the other day on this show from John Patterson, the Speaker of the House, He's like, hey, it's really up to the economic development team with the governor's office to make the decision on how much money the state will kick in on this $1.9 billion project. We know the city's in for $600 million, and then the rest of it will be split by, in some ways, the team and the state. But what exactly does that look like for the Missouri taxpayer? How much? Over how many years? Hopefully we have some answers tomorrow. We'll ask Governor Krieghauser about it when he comes on the show at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning here on KCMO. Is this something that changes my opinion of the project? No, not for a second. And as I have said for weeks, but it seems like people hear what they want to hear, I'm not against a stadium going downtown. I thought the Crossroads site was better for a multitude of reasons, but I'm not against this idea. I'm in favor of making sure the deal is as fair as possible to everybody involved. That's the team, that's the state, that's the city. And my fear remains that a city that is in a bad financial situation, when we were just sitting here a few months ago talking about how they're running a $100 million deficit, is now saying, here's $600 million. Now, regardless of how you spin it, you can spin it and say, well, it's money we were already getting from the team, so we're just giving them their money back. Okay. All right, fine. That's still money that you were collecting, though, right? That's still money you were collecting. Let's say every 2 weeks you get a paycheck from your employer, right? Let's just pick a nice round number, whatever you want to pick, $5,000. You get a paycheck from your employer. If you give them back $500, well, that's money that you were otherwise collecting. And you can say, well, it's fine. You guys had it first anyway. Doesn't matter. You're giving up money that you were otherwise collecting at a time when it seems like your fiscal house is not exactly buttoned up. So no matter how they want to spin it or sugarcoat it, that's what's going on here. And for a city that is not growing as quickly as it should and is not adding anything here, let's be clear. There's not like additive when it comes to baseball. You're getting 81 baseball games a year. You had 81 baseball games a year. It's the same exact team moving a few miles down the road. And if you're convinced that all this activation is going to lead to a windfall of sales tax revenues to the city, maybe. I mean, I suppose that's possible. But how much are you just pulling from other parts of Kansas City? How much further down the drain does potentially power and light go if you're just shifting economic activity from one part of Kansas City to the other? How much does the plaza get hurt further if you're just shifting economic activity with new restaurants and new things to do from one part of Kansas City to another? Those are the real questions that no one seems to be asking. But if you've got an ounce of economic sense, you would ask. And it's just not happening right now. So maybe we'll get some answers today on that, but I'm not going to hold my breath. I think that it can be great for Kansas City, like anything can be great, but at the right price that makes fiscal sense for everybody involved. That's it. That's the only thing that I've talked about with this deal and the Chiefs deal since day one. 913-408-7957 is how you join us on KCMO. Now, the other thing that, of course, is getting a lot of attention coming out of last night is the vote in Virginia. In Virginia, you had, by about a 51-49 margin, the voters decide that they will approve a redistricting referendum to allow the General Assembly to temporarily redraw congressional maps ahead of the midterms this year. Virginia, which has 11 congressional seats, will go from a 6-Democrat, 5-Republican breakdown to a 10-Democrat, 1-Republican breakdown after this vote was approved last night. And it was barely approved, 51-49. And you know what? The Democrats outspent the Republicans on this. And I don't mean the Democrats and the Republicans, but the groups that supported the redistricting outspent the folks who were trying to stop the redistricting 32-8, 4-1. $32 million on the pro-redistricting side to gain seats for the Democrats, $8 million on the not redistricting side to try to save some seats for the Republicans. That's how big of a blowout this was monetarily. But the reality is the Republicans, who will lose 4 seats now just in Virginia because of this redistricting, face a major uphill battle for the midterms. The good news is this, and I genuinely believe there's good news here. Democrat politicians are going to run around the country this fall saying that they are moderate and they want to bring normalcy back to politics. All you have to do is point to this in Virginia and say, your crown jewel of the 2025 election cycle last year was the governor of Virginia and Abigail Spanberger, who used that blueprint to say, I'm just here to be a normal moderate. And what's one of the first things that she does? One of the first things she does is basically take away representation from 45% of the state. One of the first things she does. Now, they will say it's a response to the Republican Party. That's what they will say. But the reality is, when you look at some of the numbers, the 2020 census was so messed up in so many ways. There were several red states that were undercounted in the 2020 census. Do you know that the Census Bureau admitted overcounting 7 blue states and only 1 red state? And the states whose populations were undercounted, Arkansas, Florida, Tennessee, Texas, Mississippi, Illinois, what do they have in common? Largely red states. So everybody is doing a little bit of gerrymandering here. That's what's going on. There's no doubt about it. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Missouri did it with Emmanuel Cleaver's seat right here in Kansas City. But you know what? When you say, all right, this happened in Texas, this happened in Missouri, we tweak things, Texas is still going to have 8 out of nearly 40 seats being Democrat. That's about 25%. Virginia will now have 1 out of 11, about 8-9% of its congressional seats represented by the Republican Party, which, by the way, like 47% of Virginians voted for Donald Trump last time around. That is far more egregious. 913-408-7957 is how you join us on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM. By the way, do you want to see Missouri go all in and just try to go for an 8-0 map? What about Kansas? Kansas thought about a 4-0 map. Right now it's a 3-1 congressional map. Do you want to see them try to basically squeeze out Sharice Davids in response? Are you just like taking the gloves off if you're a Republican voter in one of these 2 states? Or are you saying, no, don't stoop to their level, don't play their game, and in the 2030 census, this will take care of itself? 913-408-7957. We'll get to you. And speaking of voting in our 2 states, there's another big vote that is officially coming our way this fall. We'll talk about it and react to it next.
I've been selling my soul, working all day, overtime hours for bullfish hay, so I can sit out here and waste my life away, drag back home and drown my troubles away. It's a damn shame what the world's gotten to for people like me, people like you. Wish I could just wake up and it not be true, but it is. Oh, it is living in the new world.
Little throwback there. Oliver Anthony. This one took off on social media about 3 years ago. Rich men north of Richmond. And that's exactly what happened last night in Virginia. $32 million was spent by the pro-redistricting side in Virginia. And having folks who live in Virginia, they were inundated. Radio, TV, podcasting, digital media, social media. You could not avoid Barack Obama and his voice saying, go ahead, do this, redistrict. $32 million spent. They won it by 2 points. The other side had about $8 million. And I'm not saying that you can cry about it and say they have all the money. They've always had the money. They've always had more money. We've seen that in Missouri elections on things like abortion amendments and things of that nature. They've always had more of the money. That's how the game is played, whether you like it or not. And last night, the 4-1 payout resulted in the yes side getting what it wanted by 2 points, and now Virginia will redistrict. And my question for you is, do you want Missouri to just go all in on like an 8-0 map? Do you want Kansas to go all in on a 4-0 map and squeeze out Sharice Davids? Those conversations have been had. Do you just want to basically burn the whole thing down after last night in Virginia, or do you say, no, I don't want to stoop to their level? To be honest, I wouldn't stoop to their level. I wouldn't. I would say that 3-1 in Kansas is reasonable based on the makeup of the state. Some of you might say we should go 2-2. I don't see how you could do that. And did Missouri gerrymander out Emanuel Cleaver? Yeah, I've said that since the whole conversation began. I have. But it's much more justifiable than if you also go to St. Louis and do it over there. I wouldn't. Because the trends are in Republicans' favor. And the idea that the Democrats can now run on just being, moderate and normal for the midterms when they jam this thing through in Virginia, which is like a 55-45 state, and go to a 10-1 map. No. You can't really make the case to people who are paying attention anymore. The problem is no one's paying attention. That's the problem. But I would not stoop down to their level, on top of the fact that as we approach the 2030 census, the trends are very much in the Republicans' favor for red states picking up a bunch of House seats and electoral college votes, and the blue states just absolutely hemorrhaging electoral college votes and congressional seats. So, they can have their moment, but if the Republicans are smart, they'll play their hand right here. Let's go to Paul in Kansas City. He's first up. Good morning, Paul.
Hey, Pete, just a couple of points. The language of that referendum said that this was going to be temporary. Ronald Reagan said the most eternal thing in life is a government program. They're not going to make it temporary. This will be permanent. Second point is the mountain people on the West Virginia border and the North Carolina border down the Blue Ridge Mountains are going to be represented by some government worker up in Fairfax or Stratford County. That's how egregious this thing was. But Florida's up next in the queue. We'll see what DeSantis does. There's talk coming out of Tallahassee. They may zero out all Democrats. So we'll see what Florida does.
Yeah, all eyes are definitely going to be on Florida. You're right about that.
Yes, sir.
It's going to be very interesting, Paul. You're right, too, about how the state of Virginia is going to be made up. And it really is, as you know, two different states. You have the Washington, D.C. suburbs in the north, and then you really have East-West Virginia in the south and central is kind of how it's made up.
Dude, the Shenandoah Valley and the mountain people down there just west of Charlottesville, they're a different breed.
Yeah.
A different breed down there.
I haven't spent a lot of time down there, but that's my read on it as well, Paul. Good work.
Thanks, Pete.
See you later, man. Have a great day. Mike in Kansas City, good morning.
Yeah, I was talking to a guy who lives over in West Virginia, or in Virginia, and he was talking about this. He was sitting there saying there's a controversy about the mail-in ballots on the yes side. Apparently, there were 200,000 mail-in yes ballots versus 80,000 mail-in no ballots. And he said that there's basically it's disproportionate, and of course most of the mail-in ballots came at the end of the election. The other thing is he says they are very seriously going to take this thing to court
Yeah.
because of the language and the way it was worded and some of the other tactics they were using. So it may not be over yet. And I know this is trivia, but they didn't win by 2 points. They won by about 1.5.
I know.
And it wasn't
Yep.
very many. And we're talking about not that many difference in votes.
No, you're right. I think I don't have it in front of me right now, but maybe it was like 15, 20,000, something like that, if my memory is correct. It was a small number, but you know what? They got what they needed. Thank you, Mike. The mail-in ballot thing, I can't speak to it, but mail-in ballots are always going to favor the Dems. I want to talk and hear from some of the farmers coming up here on KCMO. It's early in the morning, I know. But there was this story in Newsweek saying that the White House is going after Big Meat's collusive data. If you are in the farming or ranching industry, I want to hear from you on this at 913-408-7957. Coming up next on KCMO.
You're listening to Mundo in the Morning on 95.7 FM KCMO.
I think that this story is getting wildly overlooked, not just in Kansas City, but around the country. And I know that this is obviously an industry that is big around here. So if you're in the business, not just if you're a rancher, but if you're in the business, I want to hear from you because we are a couple of weeks away from a really interesting case starting that I think should be getting a lot more attention than it is. And here's some of the background. Here's the story here on this. And it all begins on May 4th. Bench trial in the United States v. AgriStats. Now, what is this? What's the background here? This goes back a couple of years when the Department of Justice's Antitrust Division says it found one big reason why American families are getting hammered at the meat counter. And it's big meat comprising America's biggest broiler chicken, pork, and turkey processors using a sophisticated information sharing machine to achieve cartel-like pricing. So this revelation sets the stage for one of the most consequential food supply antitrust cases now on the docket. And I'm bringing this up because if you talk to anybody and you're just having a conversation about like the cost of stuff right now, one of the first things that will come up is meat. Price of beef in particular will absolutely come up. A lot of things have at least stabilized when it comes to pricing, but you want to get quality, like grass-fed beef, it's going to cost you. In some cases, you're sometimes better off like going to get a hamburger at a decent restaurant than buying yourself a pound of meat at like, $10 a pop at the grocery store. It's just crazy. So the bench trial begins on May 4th in Minnesota. United States v. AgriStats. The DOJ will make its case that the number crunching data service AgriStats has turned confidential competitor data into actionable market intelligence that help dominant processors stabilize or raise prices and weaken the pressure to compete. AgriStats portrays itself as a neutral data aggregator. The government's case paints a different picture. An alleged coordination hub that vacuumed up detailed information on prices, costs, output, customers, and production, then aggregated, analyzed, and repackaged those separate streams of competitor data into actionable market intelligence and fed it right back to the same processors that supplied it. In effect, each company got a window into its rivals' operations, not to compete harder, but to compete less. So when we talk about capitalism in America, it's all about competition in the end, theoretically driving down the price for everybody, right? More competition is a good thing. We talk about it with the airline industry. I don't want Spirit going down, not because I want to fly Spirit anytime soon, but if you lose competition in the marketplace, it just consolidates power amongst a smaller group of companies. I don't think that's a good thing for the customer. So if you've got this going on right now in the meat industry, well, and suddenly everything that your competition is doing and what their price points are, you don't have to compete harder. You can compete less. 913-408-7957 is the text line and the studio line here on KCMO Talk Radio. If you're in the business, this is where I wanted to hear from somebody because I was reading this last night and I thought it was a fascinating story. Because for years, the stereotype of antitrust conspiracies has been this idea of some smoke-filled room and gold cuff-linked executives talking about how we're going to screw the little guy. But that's not what this is here at all. You basically have an electrical equipment conspiracy, for lack of a better phrase, that can basically tell you exactly what your competitors are doing and how you can basically get an edge in what you do and where you set your prices to the point where you don't have to go out there and necessarily compete like you used to. And if everyone's got each other's pricing information, then how do you have any competition? So this is something that I want to keep a close eye on here. And even if it's in an email, just drop me a line because I'm going to bring this back up over the next couple of weeks. Pete.mundo@cumulus.com. I just want to know and hear from people in this line of work who know exactly what this is all about. Because it's not my area of expertise. I'll be the first one to admit. It's not my area of expertise, but it's something that I think if you talk to normal people and they say, hey, the price of beef is out of control. People want to point blame at the grocery store. I don't think it's their fault. They're on the back end. They got to turn a little bit of a profit. Is it the meat processors? I don't think you can point to the ranchers. I mean, I don't think you can point to them. And by the way, their input costs keep going up as well. So where do you point the finger? But if everybody, like the airline industry, is in collusion on what the costs are going to be, then you really don't have competition. It don't. On the text line, Pete, this also goes with radio. Less competition is not better. I agree. I agree. But let me just actually expand on this. So I'm not just sitting here right now competing with other radio stations in Kansas City. I'm not. I am competing with you going on your phone right now and turning on a Spotify playlist. I'm competing with someone going on YouTube and listening to a podcast, or you pulling up your Apple or your Spotify podcasts and listening to something there. I'm not just competing with radio. If you're in this chair and you think that you're only competing with another radio station up or down the dial, you don't know what planet you're on and what industry you're actually in anymore. Because I'm not just competing with other radio stations. Heck, I'm competing if you're sitting at home right now and listening to the show on your Alexa or your Google Home or the KCMO Talk Radio app. I'm competing. Let's say you're here in Kansas City, but you're from Dallas. I'm competing with your favorite radio station in Dallas that you can pull up on their app. So in theory, I actually have, while I understand people will look at the radio landscape and say, well, it's not what it used to be. I have way more competition than people who did this show 10, 20, or 30 years ago could ever imagine having. I have thousands of competitors right now. Not just 10 or 15 or 20 radio stations, literally thousands of competitors. Many that I don't even know. Because any piece of content that you're consuming right now that is not this radio station is theoretically my competition. So a little bit different, but I understand what you're trying to go for there on the text line. 913-408-7957. That's the phone line and the text line on KCMO. But the edge that we have that they don't have on the podcast and everything else, live in the moment with callers right here in Kansas City. Plus Mark.
That's right.
And usually John. But John's got some time off. John's taking off because he just had another grandbaby. So congratulations to John. He's enjoying life right now. But I'll tell you what, John's going to be working a lot harder because he's got to run around and chase all the other grandkids while the grandbaby's getting safe and getting home and things like that. He's got to get grandkids off to school and things like that. He's going to be working way harder.
Yeah, he told me he came back yesterday because he wanted to get away from all of it. Yeah. So he said he took a little break from home to come back to work yesterday, and now he's back out.
Yeah, John was off Monday, came back yesterday. He's out the rest of the week. So we are so happy for him and his family. But, yeah, he's not kicking his feet up somewhere on a beach. He's chasing around grandkids. So he's going to be working. He's going to be way more tired at the end of his days this week than he typically is. I'll just say that much. So it's Mark riding solo on the other side of the glass here on KCMO Talk Radio. Coming up next, the 6 at 6, top 6 stories in the 6 o'clock hour we'll get to here on KCMO Talk Radio, including a potential issue in the Strait of Hormuz. What's the latest? We'll share with you to start the 6 at 6 next on KCMO.
from Leawood to Liberty. You're listening to Mundo in the Morning on 95.7 FM, KCMO Talk Radio.
.649, good morning. It is great to be here on KCMO Talk Radio. Shout out to our listeners on the stream in Cincinnati, Ohio this morning. Got some of that love on the text line. So thanks for checking in. That's what I was saying earlier. My competition is not radio in Kansas City. It is anyone, anywhere in the country who can listen to anything else or watch anything else right now. So that was case in point. When we got this text, Pete streaming the show from Cincinnati, Ohio this morning. I don't know if that's a Kansas City transplant or someone traveling for work, but hey, we're glad you're here.
It's time for the 6 at 6 on KCMO Talk Radio. Number 1.
Iran attacked 3 ships in the Strait of Hormuz this morning, saying its Revolutionary Guard seized 2 of them and further inflamed tensions over the key waterway. It comes after U.S. forces seized an Iranian ship and boarded a tanker linked to Tehran's oil trade. This comes hours after the president said last night he was extending the ceasefire with Iran indefinitely so its leaders can come up with a unified proposal, but that the U.S. naval blockade will continue. That truce was set to expire today. J.D. Vance was expected to lead a delegation to Pakistan, but it's now unclear if and when those negotiations will happen. So we just sit here now and we wait to see what exactly is next in the war. How it's going to play out is still TBD. Not impacting the markets right now. Stock futures are up after the extension of the ceasefire yesterday. Dow's up 300 points as of right now. S&P's up 0.5%, 39 points. NASDAQ is up nearly 200 points. So oil has ticked up a hair. It's about $90 a barrel right now. So we just kind of wait and see how this whole thing's going to play out.
Number 2.
Well, let's go to the Kansas City Royals finally getting in the win column last night, snapping an 8-game losing streak, beating the Orioles 6-5. And it was Maikel Garcia racing home on a game-ending wild pitch for the Royals to get that 6-5 victory over Baltimore last night. So they needed that one. Mark was locked in. He was bouncing back and forth with the NBA playoffs, and he got to see the Royals get the old victory and get back into the win column last night.
I'm just glad that that pitcher from the Orioles had 2 wild pitches in that 9th inning.
Yeah, you're right about that. That was absolutely wild. But hey, you know what? Take all the help you can get because you know what? They need it right now. There's no doubt about it. All right, next up.
Number 3.
10 o'clock announcement this morning. It'll be in the Crown Center area. Governor Mike Kehoe is coming up, along with Mayor Quinton Lucas and Royals owner John Sherman. Will be announcing future stadium plans. From what I gathered yesterday, the stadium is now going to be on, I guess you'd call it the east-southeast portion of Crown Center, just due north of. There's a Catholic church there off of Pershing as it kind of moves to the south, and that is where the stadium, from what I hear, is expected to be. So it will not be in Washington Square Park. Washington Square Park may be part of some activation plan, but the reality is that was always a very tight area to put a Major League Baseball stadium. I think you got maybe 5 acres there, so it was not a lot of room. It always seemed too small, and now we know why. The team thought it was too small as well. So it looks like we're going to be eyeballing the east side of the Crown Center area, and we'll find out more today as to what that activation ultimately ends up looking like. 10 o'clock news conference expected to come down this morning, and you'll be getting live reaction to that from Kevin Keatsman here on KCMO Talk Radio.
Number 4.
Next up in our 6 at 6. Well, Deron McGee announcing that he is withdrawn from the Jackson County executive race, 4th District legislator withdrawing. And this comes at a time when it seems like Phil Lavoda may have a lockdown on the Democratic primary for Jackson County executive. And Deron McGee wisely saying, you know what, there's no point in me primarying Lavoda right now. It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. So he's dropping out. Last October, he was in the race for the interim position to replace Frank White, but he dropped out of that race as well a few weeks before the election took place. So now we know it's probably Phil Lavoda as he gets set to clear the field in the Democrat primary for the Jackson County Executive.
Number 5.
Virginia is where we go next, where last night, by a 51-49 margin, the people decided that they would redistrict the state of Virginia to go from a 6-5 map, 6 Democrats, 5 Republicans, to now a 10-1 map in favor of Democrats coming out of Virginia's congressional delegation. So they're moving full steam ahead with that. This thing got tens of millions of dollars dumped into it in the state of Virginia, and it will give, obviously, the Democratic Party a big leg up in these midterms, which was always going to be tough sledding for the GOP, but it got much more difficult after last night. It was a close vote, but ultimately the yes side on that vote won out, and several Republican seats are going to fall by the wayside coming up here in the next few weeks is when it's all going to go down. So that came out yesterday as well.
Number 6.
And last but certainly not least, a peculiar family is suing Nebraska Furniture Mart after a third-party carpet installer pled guilty to sexually assaulting a child. The Accurso law firm announced yesterday it had filed a lawsuit in Cass County on behalf of Jane Doe, 8, and members of her family. The lawsuit alleges Nebraska Furniture Mart engaged in negligent and deceptive business practices, which resulted in Jane Doe being sexually assaulted in her home. Enrique Martinez, 63 of KCK, pled guilty January 6th to 2 counts of statutory sodomy involving a child under the age of 12. Court records show that he was sentenced to 25 years in prison. So that lawsuit is happening right now. Nebraska Furniture Mart has denied the allegations. There is your 6 at 6 here on KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM. We are streaming all morning on the KCMO Talk Radio app. Coming up next, the angle from one of the most prominent political figures on the Virginia debacle next. You know, the face of this whole thing in Virginia that passed last night was former President Barack Obama. And he posted on X, "Congratulations, Virginia. Republicans are trying to tilt the midterm elections in their favor, but they haven't done it yet. Thanks for showing us what it looks like to stand up for our democracy and fight back." I know it's 7:04 and you're like, I didn't need to hear that right now. I didn't need to get all bent out of shape, and I don't need my blood boiling with a post like that from Barack Obama. Well, sorry, I had to share it with you because it is so egregious. He was the face of the entire campaign. There was $32 million dumped in on the yes side to get this thing passed last night, which it ultimately did pass in Virginia. And if you're sitting here in Missouri or Kansas and you're like, wait, in Missouri, we took a lot of grief for squeezing out Emanuel Cleaver, and all we got was one seat. In Kansas, there was some conversation around potentially trying to squeeze out Sharice David's seat, but the votes were not there in the legislature to get it done, so there's no action there. And Virginia, boom, they just flipped 4 seats. They go from a 6-4 map or a 6-5 map to a 10-1 map. Now, I find it rich because it was not long ago that Barack Obama posted on social media, "For too long, gerrymandering has contributed to stalled progress and warped our representative government. Redistricting begins next year. Let's all do our part to protect and restore our democracy." That was just 7 years ago from Barack Obama. Now he's like, oh my goodness, this is great. You guys are doing awesome. This is the exact thing that he railed against that he now is currently praising. So listen, it's politics. That's what these guys and gals do. But the question is, what is the next shoe to drop? That's the question that I think people are looking at right now. Could it be in Florida? Is there some other state that reacts to Virginia with some kind of overwhelming gerrymander? I don't think it's good for the country. Like, I don't think it's good for anybody. If you're going to have not even deep blue states. Virginia's not even a deep blue state. It was like a 52-48 state in favor of Kamala Harris last time around. But if you're going to have the state power players just try to cram this stuff down across the country, we lose. To be clear, the American people come away losers. Competition is good. I want competition. But all we're going to get now is competition in primaries in so many of these congressional races. And frankly, I don't think you get your best when your only competition is in a primary. Sometimes all you get out of that when your competition is in a primary and there's no general election competition, all you get is basically the person who is going to either be the most diehard liberal or conservative, which obviously I have a preference out of those two, but I also like it better when people's ideas are challenged, even when they're people that I like. I want to see how smart they are. I want to see how quick they are on their toes. I just think that's better for the country. When you actually we talk about in the free market, competition's a good thing. We were talking about the meat industry last hour. Yesterday, we were talking about the airline industry having more competition or needing more competition. Same thing in politics. Competition is good. Last night, Scott Jennings was on CNN. Of course, Scott was here last week in Overland Park for the Kansans for Life fundraiser, and he's going to be back in Kansas. He'll be in Wichita next Tuesday. So if you didn't get to see Scott in Overland Park and you're a listener maybe down I-35 and you're, able to get to Wichita next Tuesday night, he's also going to be in Wichita next Tuesday with the KFL folks for their fundraiser down there. So I think all the tickets are probably still up at kfl.org. But anyway, Scott Jennings last night on CNN after this vote in Virginia, here's what he had to say.
Virginia literally had the fairest maps in the nation. They had a 6-5 map, 6 Democrats, 5 Republicans. In terms of proportional representation, they had the fairest map in the nation that was drawn, by the way, by an independent commission that the voters asked for just a few years ago. Now they will have the least fair maps in the nation. And I'm not surprised that the yes vote won. They had all the money and all the lies. And sometimes in politics, when you got those two things, you can put something over the line, even something as egregious as this, This whole thing has driven Spanberger's approval ratings down into the toilet. She lied to the people of Virginia. They had to write a ballot question that was a joke. They drew maps that were a joke. Now you're going to have huge chunks of rural Virginia represented by 5 or 6 Democrats who all live in northern Virginia within about 15 miles of each other. It's a complete joke. Everybody knows it. And there's a reason that all these national Democrats and all their money came into Virginia, because, you know, they don't really care about the people of Virginia. They just care about power.
He's right. It's a power play. Now, you may say, hey, Republicans kicked it off this time around with the mid-district redistricting, and that's why you have to be sometimes careful what you wish for. Now, you can say, well, no, this didn't actually begin with the state of Texas. This began long before that, because when you look at some of the deep blue states and you see that Massachusetts has 0 Republicans, Connecticut 0, Rhode Island 0, Hawaii 0, Virginia 1. Yes, true. But there are times it seems like Republicans don't realize or are not willing to kind of see the forest through the trees and see how this could have been used against them like it is being used against them. So now what do? Do you look at Florida and say, well, you know what? We now need Florida to redistrict to the point where, you know, the breakdown there is like a 9-to-1, 10-to-1 ratio, like what you've got in Virginia? Do you play that card if you're down in Florida? It's a dicey card to play, but is that the move that you make? Is that something that the Republicans now try to do down there in the state of Florida? Or do you just say, you know what, we can use all this to our favor? Now, what do I mean by that? You can use it to your favor by saying, you're going to have a Democratic Party that is going to run here in the midterms on this idea of being moderate. Virginia is the blueprint for how it's not about moderation. They will try to hoodwink you into moderation, but it's not actually about moderates doing moderate things. Because no moderate in their right mind would do what their new governor, Abigail Spanberger, just did down there. I mean, that's anything but moderate. So they've shown their hand, and if you're the GOP, that's a good thing for you right now. If you want to find that silver lining, that's it right there. You say, do not buy this line of moderation, because we've seen Virginia play out the last year, and nothing about it has been moderate, with a governor who claims she was going to be a moderate. So if you want to find something to kind of latch onto here, that's something that the GOP could hopefully use to benefit itself as they try to move the ball forward on this entire midterm election, which is going to be very difficult for the GOP anyway. Like before Virginia happened last night, it was going to be really tough for Republicans to hold on to the House. And it got more difficult after last night. There's no doubt about it. So does it really change, though, what the outcome was going to be? Yeah, that's debatable, to be honest. And as you've seen the governor of Virginia's approval rating continue to decline ahead of this vote yesterday, maybe things swing back the other way when Virginia has a governor's race in 2029. And then when the real redistricting happens after the 2030 census, you may have a Republican in charge of that state that can hopefully make things more even. And that's really when the big battle is going to happen in 2030, because the other thing that got way undercovered over the last few years is that the 2020 census was so screwed up. The U.S. Census Bureau admitted, this is from 2022, the U.S. Census Bureau admitted that it overcounted population in 8 states and undercounted the population in 6 states. And all but one of the states that was overcounted is a blue state. So what does that mean? That means that the blue states that were overcounted got more congressional seats and, as a result, more electoral college votes than they should have gotten. The U.S. Census Bureau admitted this. And by the way, all but one of the undercounted states is red. So the undercounted states were Arkansas, Florida, Illinois, Mississippi, Tennessee, and Texas. The overcounted states, all of them except for one, were blue states. They were Delaware, Hawaii, Massachusetts, Minnesota, New York, Ohio, Rhode Island, and Utah. Utah, the only red state there. The largest mistake was in Joe Biden's home state of Delaware, which was overcounted by 6%. So, I mean, I'll give you a great example. Minnesota. Minnesota was a couple of hundred votes away from losing a congressional seat. The survey shows the state of Minnesota was overcounted by 200,000. Rhode Island would have lost a seat in the Census Bureau if the Census Bureau had counted 19,000 fewer residents. It turns out the state was overcounted by more than 55,000 people. So if that corrects itself in 2030, and on top of that, you have massive migration into red states and out of blue states, there's a world where in 2030, the Electoral College map looks very different, and the lane for Democrats to win the White House is much more difficult than it currently is today. So that's still the Super Bowl. Like, last night's a blow, but I don't think that it's as bad as some Republicans are making it out to be. It stinks if you're a Virginia resident and you're one of the 47, 48% of Trump voters who now have a 10-1 map against your party. That stinks for you. But for us here in Kansas and Missouri, we're kind of looking at it more from a national perspective. And the short term is you can use this against your opponents in the midterms. The long term is the trends still massively favor Republicans if they're smart enough to play their cards right, which is always a big question. And a big unanswered question. I'll just leave it at that. Coming up on a KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM. Here in Missouri, speaking of votes, you're going to get to vote on something that is potentially going to change the makeup of the state. And when you compare it to Kansas, man, these two states feel like they're trending in very different directions. We'll get to it next here on KCMO Talk Radio. Now, if you're somebody who is waking up this morning, and I've been there, you've been there, I'm sure, where like you're finally like, I've got to make a call. I just don't know who to call because I'm done with this bathroom. I'm done with the kitchen. I've got to get, the basement finally done. CMP Construction. Write it down. Type it into your phone. Call them now. Call them later. CMP Construction here in Kansas City. Family-owned, Kansas City company. Not a big corporate remodeler. Run by Chris and Teresa, who are KCMO fans. And honestly, that should matter. Because you get a team that treats your home the way they treat their own. You have folks who are Kansas Cityans. Their focus is on communication, quality craftsmanship. You get the free estimate and just guidance with realistic expectations. That's what CMP Construction's about. It's what they built the company on for decades here in Kansas City. And it's why people across town keep coming back to CMP Construction. So go to their website, cmpremodel.com. You can see all the work that they've done, whether it's bathrooms, kitchens, full remodels, basements, anything. And then you can give them a call. Bring them out, get the free estimate. They've got their folks who are doing all of their jobs, all right? They're not subcontracting everything. It's just their people taking care of Kansas City, and they're doing it by building that trust one room at a time. cmpremodel.com.
From Gladstone to Gardner, you're listening to Mundo in the Morning on 95.7 FM, KCMO Talk Radio.
All eyes on Virginia after they win their redistricting last night. They'll have an 10-1 map in favor of Democrats instead of a 6-5. Victor's in Parkville. Hey, Victor, good morning.
Good morning. This is a frustrating thing. The Democrats have been playing dirty politics, and I know both sides have done it. But they've been doing a better job of it for over 150 years. And even though we took the House for the first time in, decades and decades back under Newt Gingrich and got something done, we still haven't figured out how to play the game to the best of their ability. And what's made it worse is they have allowed our adversaries to corrupt the system. And the last question my wife asked me as we fell asleep last night was, are you really concerned or worried about our country? And I just answered yes. It is. It's disturbing. We really have to get on the game. Republicans do not get out in the numbers that we should. I mean, for crying out loud, there's just as many of us as there are of them. And then you have the independents that are reasonably minded. They're just not getting a good enough reason to vote for Republicans.
Well, listen,
because
couple
it's
of
the
things.
uniparty.
Couple of things. Republicans, the no side was outspent 4-1, 32 million versus 8 million. And let's be clear, Republicans came up with the idea of mid-decade redistricting. They started this round of this fight, and then in Virginia, the RNC spent $0. Zero.
There you go. We didn't spend the money.
Losers.
That's
Absolute losers. All right? I mean, scream
100%.
about the absolute, utter losers.
Well, look at what we got. We got rid of McConnell, and we turned around and got Thune. What the hell are we thinking?
Yeah, thank you, Victor. It's like the NFL coach that's great at scripting the first, set of plays, that first drive. Coach looks like a genius, right? I mean, and there are coaches out there that are notorious. They can put together that first set of drives like nobody else. 1-2 drives, boom, touchdown. I mean, they're looking great. But what makes a great coach is when you're thinking into the second, third, and fourth quarter, what do you have in your back pocket? Republicans thought that the mid-decade redistricting was somehow going to work in their favor. They start with Texas. They move to Missouri. They squeeze Cleaver. They tried in Kansas, didn't have it done. Then this big fight happens in Virginia, which was, somewhat predictable if Virginia was going to win back the governor's mansion. And the RNC, I saw it last night, didn't spend a dime, while the no side got outspent 4-1. Please, that's just pathetic. What's not pathetic is the fact that you in Missouri are going to be able to vote now. It got done yesterday. You will be voting on removing the income tax in your state, but it will be predicated on making sure that you hit certain revenue thresholds to get to the point where they can reduce the state income tax. So state representatives passed the resolution yesterday that will allow Missouri voters to decide whether to incrementally eliminate state income taxes and give lawmakers the ability to raise sales taxes. The measure is now going to appear on a November ballot, and that would be unless Governor Krieghauser decides to put it on the August ballot. I will ask Governor Krieghauser about that tomorrow morning when he's on the show in terms of when he wants to put this on the ballot. He may actually prefer August because he might think it has a likelier chance to pass in August versus November. It also gives less runway to those on the no side of this to try to build a campaign against it. So I actually think August is the play for Governor Krieghauser, but we'll see what he decides. But either way, they're clearly saying we're not going to make the mistakes of Kansas and just go to zero and not have a plan. We'll do it incrementally, and I think this could be a massive win for Missouri going forward. Coming up next, Ryan Krieghauser, U.S. Attorney for Kansas, will join us during a big week in his office next.
The fun's not done after Mundo in the Morning. Hey, it's Kevin Keatsman. Join me for Uncanceled at 10 o'clock right here on KCMO Talk Radio.
It is National Crime Victims' Rights Week, and we're happy to welcome on and say good morning to Ryan Krieghauser, U.S. Attorney for the District of Kansas, joining us here on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM, streaming as always on the KCMO Talk Radio app. So, Ryan, it's great to have you on the show as always. We appreciate the time. What do you want to make sure that Kansans are, and Missourians for that matter, are aware of this week, and what you want your message to be during National Crime Victims' Rights Week?
Well, Pete, thank you so much for having me back on the show. We're really seizing this opportunity for a National Crime Victims' Rights Week to talk about some of the most vulnerable people in our society, and that's our children. And we're talking particularly about the dangers of the internet in this circumstance. You know, we have some emerging threats here, particularly with the use of generative AI in child sexual abuse material, and I'll just refer to that as CSAM cases, as well as, you know, nihilist violent extremist groups like 764 that some of your listeners might have heard about on the radio. But just as a parent myself, I was unaware of a number of these threats to my children before getting into office here and really being exposed to the true breadth and nature of those threats. So we're just trying to educate people about them.
So these threats, how as a parent can you keep track of them, and what can you do about them as you try to protect your kids in this?
Yeah, I mean, that's really the difficulty that I struggle with as a parent with my wife and I and raising 3 kids. But there are a lot of resources out there. So the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, ICAC Task Force, has a ton of resources for parents and schools and teachers and even clergy, as well as the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. I mean, there are teams of adults who will come out to your child's school with age-appropriate content and talk about some of the dangers of reaching out to strangers or having strangers reach out to you on the internet, as well as just having a perfectly innocent photo of your child on the internet that someone can grab and then use AI to morph into CSAM. And we've had these cases in Kansas. People need to realize that. We had a case in Topeka just a couple of months ago where a guy took publicly available pictures of his coworkers and children he knew and created thousands of CSAM videos and pictures, as well as using age regression tools, AI age regression tools, to make thousands of more pictures. And he is doing 25 years in federal prison right now. And so, I mean, just having an innocuous photo posted on the internet of your child can be dangerous.
So what do you say to parents who are out there trying to figure all this out? You know, you're obviously one of them yourself with 3 kids. As you've gone through this role over the last several months, is there something that has stood out to you in terms of the one obvious thing parents can be or should be doing right now in protecting their kids from predators online and on social media?
Yeah, I think one simple thing, you know, I talked to Michael Ryan at the Heartlander a few weeks ago, and there's a PSA out there where a dad is putting his child to sleep, and he's like, hey, you know, have a good night. Just remember, in the corner of your room is all that pornographic material. I'm trusting you not to look in there. And the mean girls from your school are going to be in your room, you know, saying things and talking about you all night, and this guy's just going to be yelling out hateful things, and there's a form here to order drugs, and there's this Russian hacker who's going to ask for your password. Just ignore all that, okay? Good night. And that's what we do when we let our kids go to bed with a smartphone. And I think that's one simple thing, is take it away, you know, have some downtime without the device. And that step will go a long way.
Ryan Krieghauser is joining us on KCMO, U.S. Attorney for the District of Kansas. It is National Crime Victims' Rights Week, and we're bringing awareness to that here on KCMO Talk Radio. So the imaging part of this, I mean, everyone's got pictures, or not everyone, but most people have pictures of their family on some social media platform. And you mentioned the Topeka case. Is there some way to protect the images of your family that are on social media, or are you just saying the best way to make sure that you're protecting the people in your family with the social media images is to not do it?
I think it's unfortunately not having them up there is the best way to do it, but then getting really familiar with the privacy settings on your social media is very helpful. So you can go on and make sure that the people who have access to those photos are trusted. Limit it to your friends and your family, and make that group smaller that has access to those photos. It's kind of where we're at in this day in society, unfortunately.
So as you look at this week in particular and issues that we've had in Kansas, is there anything in Kansas, Ryan, that's unique to our state where we have more issues with fill in the blank crime that you've been noticing in your time in the office?
Yeah, I mean, just with the nature of it being a rural state, there's a lot of internet crime. There's a lot of fraud that occurs on the internet, and that happens everywhere, regardless of geography. And so we have transnational criminal organizations that are preying on elderly folks. We have a ton of Bitcoin crime. And in a rural state like ours, where people are dependent on the internet for social interactions and commerce, they're particularly susceptible to any kind of internet scam. And so, really reach out and check on your elderly parents and elderly people and be willing to ask a question or two. If you hear that someone has liquidated a bunch of decent stock positions into gold bars, you might ask why they're doing that, because it might be that they've been told a federal agent is trying to keep that safe because their account's been hacked and it's just a pure scam. And a lot of these have international ties, unfortunately.
What's the worst case of that you've seen where grandma gets fleeced out of, whatever because of some guy in India pretending to be some federal agent?
Well, one case that has made the news recently that we've put out there to try and find more victims is exactly that, is a scam with mostly international students, and it's in the news, and they have taken hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars from elderly Americans, and that's the scam is, hey, your account's been hacked, you're tied to this child porn website, and we'll figure it out. We're the federal government, but in the meantime, you need to liquidate all your holdings and give us a bunch of gold bars, and we'll keep those safe for you while we get this worked out. We don't think you're involved, but just to be safe, you need to give us all your money, and people are doing that. And it's terrible to sit across from someone who's done everything right their whole life just to, when they need that retirement money, have it taken from them.
And it seems so obvious, I know, to many people being like, how do you fall for that? So the question I have for you is, what is the common thread as to how and why people fall for it?
Well, they're very good at what they do. It is urgent. You have to do what they need immediately. They threaten you with draconian penalties, often using the veil of being a federal agent or some kind of federal crime, even missing jury duty. We had a scam down in Wichita where people were using the name of a sergeant in the Sedgwick County Sheriff's Department and saying people miss jury duty, and then the payment type. If it's gold bars, if it's Bitcoin, if it's Venmo, if it's something that the government usually would not use to take a fine or take a payment, that should raise eyebrows. So all of these things are common threads. The urgency, the threat, the type of payment, all of those things should raise some concerns.
Yeah, good point. Ryan Krieghauser on KCMO Talk Radio, U.S. Attorney for the District of Kansas. It is National Crime Victims' Rights Week, and we appreciate you, Ryan, and your team bringing awareness to it, and keep up the great work.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
You bet. Nice job by him. Yeah, if someone says they're from the government and they need you to Venmo them money immediately, that ain't the government, okay? It's not.
Talk about a bombshell.
It's not. Mark, you don't PayPal your taxes or Venmo your taxes, do you? You've never done that before? Anything like that?
Nope, I have not done that.
Okay. Yeah, there's an official IRS website where if you got to pay quarterly taxes, got to pay the government anything, that's where you would go. Do not fall for it. But I get it. I know people, elderly people in my life who have fallen for these tricks, and thankfully it hasn't been egregious sums of money, but you know what? They'll take you for a ride, to Ryan's point. All right, coming up on KCMO, Guy Benson will be here in a half hour. Of course, host of the Guy Benson Show, 2 to 5 on KCMO. We'll get his reaction to what happened last night in Virginia with this redistricting vote. We also have tickets to see Greg Gutfeld at 8:15. He will be at Cable Dahmer Arena coming up on Sunday, May 3rd. So we've got your next chance, 3 more chances to win this week at 8:15, today, tomorrow, and then again on Friday. But next, this story I'm going to share with you, well, it makes me very sad, but it also needed to be said. We'll do it next on KCMO Talk Radio. We've got rain coming again tomorrow night. Severe weather is on the way here for Kansas City, and we've just gotten soaked, especially certain parts of town. So if you're someone who is starting to notice maybe some cracks in the walls, maybe a little bit of water in the basement, it's not really bothering you, but it just feels off, protect your home equity right now and get KC Pier here in Kansas City out for a structural consultation. And the best thing about KC Pier, when you pick up the phone and call them, you will actually get someone in Kansas City who answers the phone. All right? I mean, how many times do you dread to call fill-in-the-blank company and you're like, what's going to happen here? Is a machine going to answer? Is it someone in, some other part of the world who's also going to fleece me for, some retirement money down the road? No, you get a person in Kansas City, not a call center, not a robot, a person who knows our town, the soil, and the concerns of homeowners here in Kansas City. And KC Pier is locally owned. Every job is done by their own trained employees, and that is what makes them Kansas City's foundation repair experts. They give you a lifetime transferable warranty. Plus, they come back with 1- and 2-year monitoring visits to make sure your foundation is performing the way that it should. They don't do the job, and then you never hear from them again. They stand by their work, and they prove that with the lifetime transferable warranty and the monitoring visits every couple of years. And they will take an educational approach, walking you through their simple ABC solution options so you understand what your home needs, why it needs it, and what makes the most sense. KC Pier, Kansas City owned and home of the lifetime warranty. Go to kcpier.com. That's kcpier.com and protect that home equity now.
Vince Colonnese here. Join me for your lunch hour from 11 to 2 on 95.7 FM, KCMO Talk Radio.
It made me so sad to read this news story, but you know what? It's going to make many of you happy. It just saddens me. Many of you are going to be so fired up when I read this. Woo! And I am too, because it's true. Everything about it is true and needed to be said. But it still saddens me as a big fan. So, I'm sure you've seen some of the news stories and on social media that Bruce Springsteen's going around the country doing this big tour, and he's fighting the man, and he's fighting Trump, and he's sticking it to Trump, and no kings, and, the whole deal, right? Well, this week, Springsteen was in his home state of New Jersey. Thankfully, he's not coming to Kansas City because I don't think I would go. But I will admit, if my favorite musician was 20 minutes down the road, would I be able to hold off? It's easy for me to say right now that I would not go. But if he was right there at T-Mobile, I might have a weak moment. It's very possible. I might have a weak moment. I'm just saying.
Even with those prices?
Well, you know what? The prices would probably, talk me off the ledge. But, if somebody gave me the tickets or something or tried to screw with me and said, I got them for you. I got the devil on one shoulder, got God on the other, being like, don't do it. No, I got free tickets for you, man. So, anyway, with him doing these shows this week in his home state for the first time on this No Kings tour that he's doing, I thought this was a fascinating piece written in NJ.com. The New Jersey, official website, their newspaper there. And, these people love this guy, right? It's his home state. It's like you think about people that define that state, Springsteen's number one. And the newspaper leans left. And even they're calling out Springsteen with this piece this week titled, Springsteen's New Jersey concert was poisoned by hypocrisy. Anti-Trump final act is a tragic mistake. It's not written by some conservative outlet in Florida. This is written by someone in the New Jersey newspaper, NJ.com, writing about basically a guy who's considered a saint in the state. They go on the note that as he stood at center stage in Newark on Monday, Springsteen was a familiar portrait of rock god pomp and fervor. Fans roared with adoration as the resolute boss opened up his Prudential Center concert with the same preamble he's given each night on his new tour. The article goes on the note, one problem. It's all hypocritical crap. Profiteering over legitimate protest. Springsteen's artistic identity as a bleeding heart populist who sings for the destitute and downtrodden has never been more disconnected from his economic behavior as a touring actor businessman. The blue-collar troubadour now charges exorbitant amounts for his tickets, up to $2,900 retail for the best seats in Newark on Monday. Prices he agreed to despite fan backlash. He's selling No Kings branded flags for $90 in the arena concourse. And last week, his merchandise distributor got an injunction passed to ban bootleg T-shirt sales outside of the venue. Even as crews of independent sellers, fine examples of working-class people he's romanticized for 50 years, hawk merch at nearly every other Prudential show without issue. The unrecognizable reality of the 2026 Springsteen experience, coupled with the tour's political framing, and exploitation of American division and outrage in a manner no better than any cable news pundit, is a damning contradiction, a lapse in logic. It threatens to tarnish the final act of Bruce's career and is no small tragedy for New Jersey's greatest rock star. That is so good. And in many respects, this whole act of Springsteen has come to define the base of the Democratic Party. And it is ripe with hypocrisy from the standpoint of saying, we know what's best for everybody else. We're here for the working man and woman. Yet what you've seen in American politics over the last 30 years, going back to really, Bill Clinton is when it started to shift. The working class continues to shift to the right. But these people insist that they know what's best for you. They don't really have the self-awareness to understand their own hypocrisy and to take a step back, look in the mirror, and wonder why many working class voters voted for Donald Trump 3 times in the last 3 elections. And Bruce has never been able to grasp that. You would think 2016 might be a wake-up call for someone like Springsteen, who's literally sung about voters that voted for Donald Trump for 50 years. Why they did move to the right. Why they then doubled down in 2020 and tripled down in 2024 to get him back to the White House when it seemed like his political career was dead when he left in 2021. And instead, they go back to the same old talking points and the no kings and the dictator this and the dictator that. And it's like, would you have a little bit of self-awareness? A little bit. But, you know, what Bruce is really doing here is putting on a show for whether it's Fairfax County, Virginia last night with all the attention they're getting, whether it's, you know, Northeast Johnson County. That's who he's putting on the show for. That's who it's geared towards. Some of these very suburban districts who, by the way, generally speaking, live fairly conservative lifestyles in many cases, but have such guilt about it and have such concerning levels of TDS, they can't really understand how they square their lives and how they live their lives with what they actually vote for. And Bruce, who's done everything in his power to make as much money as he possibly can, which, you know what? It's America. He's allowed to do that. But then claim he's there for the little guy and put on this egregious tour for supposedly fighting for the little guy with $2,900 tickets? Please, spare me that. Spare me. So I still love the guy's music, but this is such a good article. I'll share it on social media because he is really putting a stain on what is an amazing music legacy. Guy Benson next hour. Where are the Royals going? And Gutfeld tickets in 15 minutes. 2 hours away from the big announcement downtown. That is where the Royals are going to be joined by Governor Mike Kehoe and Mayor Quinton Lucas to announce the Royals getting set to move their stadium down to Crown Center. Not Washington Square Park. It will be a Crown Center location, as I shared on social media yesterday. I would say it's kind of like the southeast part of Crown Center, just north of the Catholic Church that is there off of Pershing when it starts to go to the south side. That's where the stadium itself is going to be. There will also be announcements as it's related to what Crown Center is going to look like, how that gets remodeled. I don't know what exactly the real estate deal is going to be between the Royals and the Hall family, but obviously that is part of the equation here as well. And what happens to Washington Square Park, I don't know. You know, I'm fine with it. I have questions about ingress, egress, and what that looks like, whether it's getting off I-35, whether you're getting off 71 Highway and you're coming across 27th Street or 22nd Street or whatever it might be coming from the east. They're going to have to do a lot of work to make that an easy flow in and out of the stadium. There will need to be some more parking. I don't care what they say. We've got 27,000 parking spots within walking distance. Yeah, if you like to walk a half marathon, that sounds great. But, you know, most people, let's be honest, are not going to want to walk several street blocks to their parking garage, especially with some of the crime issues in Kansas City. Let's be clear on that as well. That's why I also thought that any location downtown, I liked, and I still, if you just gave me my option, Crossroads location from 2 years ago versus this, I believe that Crossroads location was better for Kansas City financially and was a better fit for the Royals. The issues here with this location are going to be ingress, egress, and how far are people being asked to walk to get to their car. And the first time you have something happen to somebody walking back to their car after a weeknight game, that is going to be huge news in Kansas City. And the Royals better be prepared for that. Let's be honest. I know that's years away from a new stadium opening up. We don't know who's going to be in charge of Kansas City at that point. It won't be Mayor Lucas. He's done next year. But those are the kind of things that people are going to be thinking about when they're going down to the ballpark. Assuming you don't live in Kansas City and you're not going to hop in an Uber or something like that, or like take the streetcar, which I think is just, you know, not really mass transit. For people who are driving, which is most people, going to a ball game, where are they parking? What does it look like to walk from their parking garage to the stadium? When I was at the Big 12 tournament last month, and I was there as a member of the media, at the end of the night on Friday night at the Big 12 tournament, there was an announcement that was made over the loudspeaker just for the media members in the media area. And they said, if you want an escort to the parking garage, come find us and we'll escort you. Now, let's be honest, that was probably mostly for any female broadcasters or media members who didn't feel comfortable at 10, 11 o'clock at night walking to their car. The parking garage was 2 blocks away. It was like whatever it is, the Ed Wolf parking garage right there just north of T-Mobile on the east side. It's a block and a half, maybe 2 blocks to that parking garage. They weren't asking you to walk 5, 6, 7, 8 blocks. And they were offering escorts to the parking garage. Now, it's nice. It's the right thing to do. But I promise you, the Royals and the city are not going to say, hey, if you want an escort to your car after a Royals game, we got you covered. That's not going to happen. So what does that look like from a security perspective to make sure that you are a destination? I think those are things that I don't expect to be answered today. It's not going to change the plans, but those are real things that regular people are going to think about when they consider going to a game. There's no doubt in my mind. And the city's got to be prepared for it. And more importantly, the team, which makes the decision ultimately, has got to be prepared for this as well. That's why I also thought that the Clay County option of all the options out there had a lot of intrigue to it and a lot of potential to it. But I get it. The Royals did not want to go to a vote. They did not want to run another election after what happened 2 years ago. They had no interest in doing that, going to the voters and saying we need a 0.5 cent sales tax. And that's why ultimately I think Kansas City, Missouri won out. Now, John Sherman's always talked about being in the downtown hub of kind of the center of a city. That's been appealing to him for a long time. But I also think the idea of not having to have voter input on this made it very, very compelling. So 10 o'clock this morning is when the official announcement will take place. In the meantime, before we get to Guy Benson coming up here in a few minutes, I also wanted to touch on this story. And this is a wild story. The Southern Poverty Law Center is now alleged to have paid upwards of $270,000 to, among other things, plans and organization for the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia. The Southern Poverty Law Center also paid six-figure amounts to people at the same time they were listed as extremists that they claimed they were battling against. So this is a really interesting story. And this is all tied back to, remember that Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville? And that became a big scandal for President Trump at the time during his first term because some of what he said was maybe not the most eloquent, but also was taken massively out of context. So this was announced yesterday by the DOJ and the FBI. And I want to play some of this from the press conference yesterday. Here we go. All right, hang on. We'll get this clip here lined up of Todd Blanche and what he said yesterday at this press conference. Acting United States Attorney General. Here we go.
I just want to make sure I understand. You're alleging that the Southern Poverty Law Center was paying the leaders of KKK and other groups to continue their operations? Is that?
I'm not alleging it. The grand jury returned an indictment that says that. And so what the investigation found, according to the indictment that was returned today, is that they were paying. So the Southern Poverty Law Center is raising money, asking folks to give them money to dismantle racism. And over a very long period of time, they were using some of the money they raised from donors to pay to, they called them field, basically to informants, for information, for access, to just pay them for certain to do certain things, and so yes, that's exactly what the indictment charges.
So think about this: the Southern Poverty Law Center, which made its name fighting the Ku Klux Klan, in an indictment, is alleged to have defrauded donors by secretly funneling money to the same extremist groups they insist that they have been fighting for decades. They couldn't find enough racism in America in the 21st century, so they had to pay racists to create the idea of racism being alive and well in America. Think that's what happened here. That's what a grand jury came back and said happened here. The Southern Poverty Law Center paying the organizations that they claim to be fighting to do things that bring attention to the idea that racism is alive and well in America in, at the time, 2017. That is unbelievable. Goes on the note, and I'm reading from the grand jury indictment here. A member of the online leadership chat group that planned the 2017 Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, and attended the events at the direction of the Southern Poverty Law Center. The individual cited here made racist postings under the supervision of the Southern Poverty Law Center and helped coordinate transportation to the event for several attendees. Over that period of time, the Southern Poverty Law Center paid $270,000. That is a wild story that feels like to me should be a national story and be getting much more attention than it is. But of course, there's only certain media outlets that have any interest in covering this. 11-count indictment alleges the nonprofit committed financial crimes by telling donors their money was being put towards dismantling hate groups when instead some of their money furthered the interests of the hate groups. Prosecutors said the center paid informants and extremist groups like the Klan, The Aryan Nation and neo-Nazi groups at least $3 million between 2014 and 2023 through a now-defunct program that aimed to infiltrate and monitor the group's activities and threats. Unbelievable. Truly unbelievable stuff. You can't make it up, man. But some people, they just want to be all in on this. They really do. 913-408-7957 is how you join us on KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM. We are streaming, as always, on the KCMO Talk Radio app. We got Guy Benson coming up here in a few minutes. We'll get to him here on KCMO. And we got to give away the tickets soon as well. Do we have time? I don't know, Mark. You tell me. John's not here today, so we're running a lean operation here. Give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. What do you want me to do? Down? Okay, down. All right, let's do the Gutfeld ticket. 7th caller, and then we'll get to Guy Benson. 913-408-7957 to see Greg Gutfeld at Cable Dahmer Arena, Sunday, May 3rd.
from the nation's heartland. You're listening to Mundo in the Morning on 95.7 FM, KCMO Talk Radio.
All right, Mark, who won the Gutfeld tickets May 3rd at Cable Dahmer Arena here in Kansas City?
Kelsey in Valley Falls.
All
Congratulations.
right. Shout out to Kelsey in Valley Falls. Congratulations. Guy Benson's here on KCMO. We got a lot to talk to him about. Of course, you hear him every afternoon, 2 to 5 on 95.7 FM. Of course, a political analyst as well for Fox News on the TV side. He's a Virginia resident, so we'll get to all the chaos that happened there last night. But, Guy, you know, you're on Gutfeld's show once in a while. What should Kansas Cityans expect with Greg coming to town here in a couple of weekends?
Oh man, yeah, it's a wild experience to be on that TV show. Usually once a month. Sometimes a little often more often I'll be on. Just you never quite know what to expect, what he might throw at you at the last minute, how he might introduce you in front of millions of people. He usually, I think for the live audience shows around the country, he usually goes with Tom Shalhoub, who is just a fantastic, wonderful, funny guy. So yeah, that'll be great. So congratulations to Kelsey.
Yes.
And everyone else who's going.
Yes, Tom Shalhoub will be here as well. All right, last night in Virginia, 1.5 was the margin of victory for the yes side, redistricting your home state or your state that you currently reside in from 6-5 Democrat to 10-1 Democrat. How surprised were you by how close this was, or is this what you expected based on how things were trending over the final few days?
You know, I was basically expecting this to be mid-single digits. Kamala Harris carried Virginia by 6 points. Jay Jones, our now Attorney General, who had said in text messages to Republicans that he wanted to kill Republicans and their children, won by 6 points. So felt like that was kind of the ballpark that I was expecting. I didn't think that it would be a blowout like Abigail Spanberger, the governor, her election last year, she won by 15. I didn't think it'd be that high. I thought there was a chance that it would be this close, and I thought there was also maybe like a 1 in 5 chance that the no side could actually win. And one thing that's, I think, really frustrating is, given the margin that we ended up seeing, I think the no side absolutely could have won, actually, if there had been any sort of concerted effort, smart concerted effort by Republicans to even remotely attempt to come close to the spending and advertising blitz that the Democrats waged in this state, and something I'll talk about later today on my show. Some of the recriminations on the conservative side, the Republican side, are going to be pretty intense, because I think this was a blown opportunity. The Democrats treated it like a really, really important moment to get 4 additional House seats, and the Republicans, with a few exceptions, but largely the party in terms of spending and attention and any of that, were like, good luck. And I do think that, given the fact that this will end up being, probably about half of Kamala's margin, the electorate moved dramatically to the right, not just compared to last year, but compared to 2024. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of movement already in that direction, and I think there was a very, very straightforward case that was not partisan at all. Like, I think the more the Republicans fought this openly as Republicans, it might not have helped, but there was a nonpartisan case to make here, which was, we all voted, including myself. We voted in 2020 in a regularly scheduled high turnout presidential election to ban partisan gerrymandering and replace it with this independent commission, which then created popular districts that are among the fairest in the country. And this big scheme was a snap election to change the Constitution by a bare majority, to return the power to politicians to do partisan gerrymandering for political reasons. That is a very unpopular position. I think there was a lot of persuasion that could have been done. There just wasn't nearly enough of it. And I saw probably hundreds of propaganda ads to vote yes over the course of months, starting with the Winter Olympics.
I never saw one no ad on television in Virginia. Never one.
Wow.
So to lose that, apparently some ads did run eventually. I never saw one. My good friend Mary Catherine Ham, who lives here, never saw one. I talked to someone yesterday who's very plugged into Virginia politics. He told me he saw two. And he estimated he saw probably 400 yes ads and literally 2 no ads. So I feel like this actually could have been won, and now we wouldn't be talking about, a moral victory or, putting our eggs in the basket of the Virginia Supreme Court to throw this thing out, because they decided in their infinite wisdom to rule on whether this whole scheme was legal after the referendum happened. So I believe the case is being heard later this week. Lower courts had already ruled this to be illegal. Have the Democrats did it illegally. So, I'm not holding my breath on that front, but I've heard from people that there's a very strong case to throw this thing out. We shall see. But boy, it stings a bit to go from one of the fairest maps in the country to literally the least fair map in the country, the most gerrymandered map in the country, and the word that they used, Pete, to market the whole scheme was fairness. Orwellian stuff.
Yeah, it was. Guy Benson's here. He's on at 2 o'clock on KCMO. In the last couple of minutes, you kind of alluded to it there, Guy, but before I hit the bottom of the hour, the Republicans who, some will say they started this with Texas mid-district or, mid-cycle redistricting. Missouri squeezed out a Democrat seat here in Kansas City. But to your point, they should have seen the battle coming in some of these bluer states, and they didn't spend the money. The RNC didn't spend a dollar. The spend was $32 million on the yes side to $8 million on the no side is what I saw. So how much blame did the Republicans deserve here in the final minute or so for not planning for this the last year or so?
Yeah, I mean, they definitely deserve a fair amount of blame. I would say that New York actually went before Texas. Texas, you could at least have defended. I was up in the air on Texas, go either way. But California then swooped in and answered Texas, 5 seats for 5 seats. There were, single seats here or there, as you mentioned. This one was a real escalation in Virginia, especially after Republicans in Indiana said, you know what? No, we're not doing this anymore. Let's de-escalate. Virginia said, we're going as aggressive as possible. And now we'll see what the Republicans do. There are some people saying Ron DeSantis in Florida is now going to fight back. I mean, we could be in a spiral here. And I'm not necessarily totally against that because I'm pretty mad about what the Democrats have done here. But whatever Republicans have to do, they've got to do it smartly. And it doesn't seem like that has been happening yet.
No, and that's unfortunately sometimes never their strong suit. All right. All right. Guy Benson on KCMO Talk Radio. We just lost him, but we'll get him back on to say goodbye. In the meantime, we have the news coming up in 2 minutes, and then Patrick Touhey in studio on the Royals deal on KCMO.
From Overland Park to Parkville, you're listening to Mundo in the Morning on 95.7 FM, KCMO Talk Radio.
Patrick Touhey is here from the Show Me Institute. Today's a big day. Finally getting an announcement from John Sherman and the Royals. He'll be joined by Governor Mike Kehoe and Mayor Quinton Lucas. It will be down at Crown Center as they get set to announce the ballpark, which learned yesterday is not going to be at Washington Square Park. It will now be, I believe, from what I've heard and people I talked to yesterday, kind of the southeast part of Crown Center when Pershing turns to the south there, just north of a church. So that's where now the ballpark itself is going to be. And Patrick, you're hearing some rumors as to the why behind that. Good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, what I am hearing is that the original Washington Square Park footprint abutted on the north end railroad tracks, coming and going from Union Station. And apparently there's the Federal Railroad Safety Act or something like that, which really restricts how and what you can build next to railroad tracks. And so they may have discovered that late, like in the last day or two, and then decided, well, we don't want to build there because of those restrictions, which again tells me that this is just the Keystone Cops. You know, once again, the city can't put together a deal or, do its due diligence. It's just rushing to throw money at John Sherman.
That's interesting. You know, I've not heard that rumor. It does make some sense. I mean, the location was always very small for a baseball park.
It seemed that way to me, but what do I know about construction?
Yeah, but either way, if this was just found out in the last couple of weeks, it would be surprising to me that they were able to pivot to this new plan that's going to be announced today, because that stuff takes a while to usually, put together.
I agree. And I wouldn't say they found out in the last few weeks. I think they found out in the last few days.
Really?
I would imagine they voted to lease the Washington Square Park, right? They did that just a few days ago to the Royals, and now they're changing the location. So again, we'll see if there's any further reporting on this, if people will go on the record.
But it would seem to me you would need the engineers and the architects to actually make sure that whatever they're going to announce today is going to work.
Pete, come on. But are you new to Kansas City? This is not how we do things. We throw a bunch of money at it and we worry about the details later. That's the whole story. For 2 years, we've been talking about this. Give us the money and we'll figure out the details later.
Yeah, well, you may be right on that. All right, so we've got this deal. We know that the city's kicking in $600 million. We don't know what the state's going to do.
No.
And it's not even up to the state. It's going to be up to the economic development team on behalf of the governor, which is what I was told this week.
Yeah, and a Field of Schemes website, Neil DeMoss, put up a post quoting John Patterson, who just embarrassed himself by not understanding the numbers and bond stuff. And so
he's the Speaker of the House in Missouri, by the way.
Yes, a Republican. And again, we are where we've always been, which is the numbers don't seem to add up, but people are telling us they can make it work. So we'll find out.
Well, why are the numbers not adding up?
Well, because he misunderstood, Patterson did, how much money the state portion of revenue, and then kind of didn't quite do the math on what it would take.
When he was on my show or somewhere else?
No, this was it was a Field of Schemes. I don't know if it was a press release or a statement he gave to a reporter, but he didn't seem to understand what it would cost the state each year in bond debt to issue $900 million. So again, it's these people who just throw out happy talk, but haven't spent time on a calculator doing basic math. And it's more of the same. We're seeing it in Kansas with the Chiefs. We're seeing it now in downtown Kansas City. It's what we get from these guys for years. Their projections don't math out. Their promises don't work out. But they just want to hurry up and build something so that everybody's happy with a new structure.
All right. So now, we know Crown Center's involved here, which means the Hall family has to have some role in all of this.
Yeah, they own it. And it's disappointing.
Well, I was going to say, why is it disappointing? Explain that.
So 2019, the governor of Kansas and the governor of Missouri and the Missouri legislature put aside the border war, right?
The economic border war. Yes.
Right. Laura Kelly issued that executive order saying she wouldn't allow state agencies to poach businesses from the Missouri side. By the way, I don't know that she's rescinded that executive order. It seems like that's a necessary thing for her to do. But and a lot of the data provided for that talking about how bad economic development subsidies were and how they just cost taxpayers and they didn't generate jobs and they weren't good for the local economy was all provided by the Hall Family Foundation. They were leading the way, making the argument that these types of subsidies are bad for taxpayers. Now, just 6 short years later, they are selling out to what may be the largest economic development scheme in Kansas City's history. So they're not the only one who I think has maybe brought shame on themselves, but going in just a few short years to saying how bad these types of deals are to now when it's an opportunity for them to make money, never mind, forget all that stuff. We're down with these types of subsidies.
Well, couldn't they say, hey, this is a team or a business, as they will frame it, that's already in Missouri that is staying in Missouri? I mean, they're not like Missouri did not give up a subsidy to lure a team from Kansas. They're just doing it for a team that's already here. Would that be their argument?
Oh, who knows? I'd love to hear it. But again, what they argued was that these types of subsidies are bad. They don't help the region. They don't help the local economy. Regardless of whether you're actually crossing the border, their data talks about how all of this is just a big waste of money. But when they have a chance to make a buck, never mind. They're all for it. And that's disappointing. And they're not the only ones to have, I think, failed to live up to their principles.
Patrick Touhey with the Show Me Institute is here on KCMO. When it comes to competition between states, like I like competition between states on tax policy, right? Or property tax policy or sales taxes or income taxes or corporate taxes. But this is not, to me, competing when you're just saying who's going to give up the most taxpayer money to fill in the blank company. Like that's not how I view competition. Is that how you view competition?
No. I think you're exactly right. If I've argued for years that Kansas City needs to understand that it's a competitive environment. It needs to regulate and tax in a way that makes Kansas City and provide services in a way that makes Kansas City a more attractive place to live. It is failing to do that. Johnson County is growing faster than Kansas City, Missouri. We are slowly fading away. It's a problem statewide in Missouri, but Kansas City certainly has the same problem. And so we need to compete. Taking on more and more public debt to win over a couple of billionaires here or there is not competitive in a way that makes you more attractive. You're just trying to pick off businesses. You're trying to pick off employers. I wrote a few weeks ago about Tulsa's success in attracting remote workers. They didn't just go for employers, they actually went and tried to attract people. So if you're wedded to the idea of using economic development subsidies to grow your economy, there are ways to do it that have proven somewhat successful. But just giving a bunch of money to big projects, to amenities, hoping that will improve your municipal finance or grow the economy just doesn't work. People aren't going to move to Kansas City because the Royals moved their stadium a few miles.
Now, I did see, though, yesterday, Dave Helling and you had a back and forth on that, where he noted that Johnson County is obviously growing. Kansas City, Missouri is not. But Johnson County does, when you factor all your taxes in, have a higher tax threshold than Kansas City. So that was his response to you. How would you respond to him?
Well, what he said was Missouri versus Kansas, that Kansas has actually got higher taxes statewide. But again, people don't move vaguely from state to state. They move from municipality to municipality. They pick a place to move. And again, it's not necessarily tax rate. If you're living in a place where your taxes are marginally higher, but you feel safer, you've got better schools, better
services,
infrastructure, right? That's important. Kansas City is a high tax, low service city. We've got to come to terms with that, and we've got to do something to change that. That's a long-term view. The earnings tax is part of that. I don't argue it's going to be easy. It's going to be difficult, but the city has got to understand that they're in a competitive environment, and what are the things we can do to make us more appealing. And again, throwing money at billionaires isn't going to work.
What about the surprise votes here? It was 11-1-1 in the vote at City Hall last week to basically move ahead with this project for the Royals, the $600 million from the city of Kansas City, Missouri. Jonathan Duncan, Mr. KC Tenant, Mr. Fight the Power, was a yes vote on this, and Nathan Willett, the only no vote, and then Crispin Rea, who's the at-large 4th District Council member, voted present, which I don't even know what that means. Talk about the all-time fence-riding moment in City Hall history. What do you make of how that vote broke down at City Hall?
These guys don't live up to their principles. They say, I'm against this type of project. I don't want to give money to billionaires. Yet when push comes to shove, they failed to vote against it. Man, I am no progressive. Spoiler alert, I am no progressive. But when you look at people on the council who describe themselves as being progressive, like, good Lord, man, vote your principles. Don't take a hit because the mayor twisted your arm. Now Duncan has this ridiculous argument that I introduced an amendment that allowed the city manager, required the city manager to have to come back to the council before issuing a contract. He would have had to do that anyway. Your amendment was meaningless. What you did was fail to live up to your principles. Now, there are probably few people who listen to you who are big fans of Jonathan Duncan, but the progressives, the KC tenants, the people who want fighters in City Hall should be really disappointed that he caved on such an easy vote. He was going to lose. Just stand up, man. Act the way you talk. But even Jonathan Duncan can't be counted on to vote his principles. And Crispin Ray, you're right. Like, what was that? You're not going to vote for it, but you don't have the stones to vote against it. From the Hall family to some of our legislators, it's really disappointing that people who want to be seen as opposing these types of deals, when they have the opportunity to oppose them, don't.
Yeah, I think that's grounds for having to remove his man bun, Jonathan Duncan. I mean, that's a tough look. He's totally man bunned out at this point.
And again, it's conservatives and liberals alike on these issues, whether they're at the state level or at the city level, too often fold because I don't know what it is. They don't understand basic math, or they don't want to make a difficult vote. But good Lord, man, you got elected to office to do this type of thing. Stand up and be a man.
Yeah. All right. Patrick Touhey, stand up and be a man. That's what he says. I guess I'll see you opening day 2030 down at the new ballpark.
Wherever it is.
Yeah. Oh, my gosh. All right. We'll see what happens. 10 o'clock today is the big press conference. John Sherman, a majority owner of the Royals, Mike Kehoe, and Quinton Lucas, all part of that 10 o'clock this morning. Good to see you, my friend.
It's good to be here. Thank you.
All right. We'll get to What If Wednesday coming up next. 3 questions here on KCMO.
from Smithville to Shawnee Mission. You're listening to Mundo in the Morning on 95.7 FM, KCMO Talk Radio.
8:51. Good morning. Happy Wednesday. It is that time of the week on KCMO. Let's do it.
95.7 KCMO Talk Radio. It's time for What If Wednesday.
What if, instead of having you on this radio station, there was somebody else?
All right, Mark, you're in charge. All right. You got a heavy load today. John's got the rest of the week off as he celebrates the birth of a new grandbaby, which really means he's got to help out with all the other grandkids. So he's got to be working harder there than he is here. So what do you got for me on What If Wednesday?
All right. What if Republicans had matched Democrats on spending in the Virginia election?
I believe they would have actually won. The no vote would have won. It was a 1.6% margin of victory last night for Virginia to redistrict its 11-seat congressional map from 6-5 to 10-1. Republicans were outspent, or the no side was outspent, $32 million to $8 million, 4-1, and they broke out Obama. All right, they had old Barry up there, TV, radio, social media ads, everything you could possibly find. You know, my parents live in Virginia, so they experienced it firsthand. Obama was all over the place, and they outspent 4-1, and the vote was 1.5 points. And this is what is infuriating about the RNC and just, you know, Republicans in general. They kick off some of this mid-district redistricting or mid-cycle redistricting with Texas, and that's fine. You can make the case for why that was the right thing to do, right? And they still had 8 Democrat districts in Texas out of almost 40, so it was about 25%. A little more than that. It was like 8 out of 38 stay blue and 30 are red. They flipped about 5 seats. They don't think ahead to be like, all right, what other states might react to us? Okay, California, they swapped 5 for 5. No one really thought about Virginia. And then this happens in Virginia after they win the governor's mansion back last year, and they go all in on it. And it's like, whoa, what's going on here? And there's no plan to fundraise. There's no plan to spend money. And Guy Benson talked about it earlier in the hour. It just didn't seem like there was any kind of a plan. And that happens to the Republicans all the time. They get outspent, they get their butts kicked, and then they just cry about it, despite the fact that they actually had a pretty darn good showing considering how much they were outspent. So go figure. That's unfortunately how it seemed to have gone for them last night. What's next, Mark?
What if Royals fans can save money on parking at a new ballpark downtown?
Well, you're going to have to you could probably save money at the new downtown ballpark, but you're going to have to walk through some areas of town you probably don't want to walk through. Mark and I were just talking about this during the break, and Mark's like, well, you know, a premium season ticket holder or a premium parking pass for a season ticket holder is what, $3,000 you said, Mark?
About $3,000, yeah.
So 81 games, that's about $35-$40 to park. I'm sure if you want premium parking at the new ballpark, you'll pay at least that much. That's my hunch.
Yeah, at a parking garage like right across the street or something.
Yeah. Now, could you find cheaper parking because you'll be more of a downtown setting? Yes. You could walk a mile down 27th Street and go to East Patrol, and I'm pretty sure that's not where you want to park. All right? I mean, it's going to be about a 20, 25-minute walk. You'll be right there. I've been down to East Patrol, and I'm telling you, you really don't want to be hanging out there, okay, late at night. You don't. Now, you might find $10 parking, but what's your life worth to you, Mark? That's what I want to know.
There's some spots like right off Graham that I found that can have some free parking still. So for me, I'm looking for that free parking, and I'll just walk a little bit farther.
Yeah, but, you know, Mark, you're acting like these guys haven't thought about this, okay? They're not going to set this ballpark up for you to get free parking 5 minutes away. Yeah. They're just not. Unless you want to show up 3 hours before the game. I know you've done it at T-Mobile. Mm-hmm. I know you had your spots when you'd go down there and sneak around the crossroads and you'd find a good place to park. Mark, those days are going to be over, brother. I hate to break it to you.
It could be.
They're going to be over. I really don't think the parking is going to change all that much in terms of, like, the cost. Right now, it's what, $20 to go park at a Royals game, general admission parking?
Yeah, 21, 22.
Yeah, something like that. By the way, that's a big part of the Royals' bottom line out there. They will figure out a way to make sure they're doing just fine on parking. I don't know how exactly. I don't know what it looks like. But I don't think that they made this move thinking we'll give up all our parking revenue.
They'll own all those parking garages around there.
There will be a way that they will make out just fine. And they're going to make sure that guys like Mark aren't, able to show up at 6:30 for a 7:10 first pitch and find free parking 5 minutes down the road. Sorry, Mark. It's not going to happen.
It's all right.
What's next?
What if Springsteen had taken his No Kings tour to Kansas City?
I wouldn't have gone. Okay, I would not have done it. I've had this debate with myself many times as Springsteen continues this absurd, beyond hypocritical No Kings tour that he's doing around the country. And I kept saying to myself, what if he actually came here? Would I have the ability to not go? And I believe I would have had the ability to say, I'm not going to do it. The prices are absurd. And I would have just said, I'm not going to go and potentially have the last time I see my favorite musician of all time play live, have him lecture me about Trump and dictatorships. I'm not going to do that to myself. That would be unfair. I've seen the guy probably a dozen times live. I will not have my final memory be this lecturing from Bruce Springsteen. So I think I would be able to avoid it. I'm pretty sure I would be able to kind of hold back and say, don't do it, Pete. It's not a good idea for you. But you know what? We'll never know because he ain't coming here. And that's okay with me. Coming up next, earlier in the week, we told you about how multiple schools in Kansas, Olathe, Shawnee Mission, are under investigation by the feds for some of their Title IX practices. Paul Zimmerman is an attorney with the Defense of Freedom Institute. He's been involved with these allegations, and he'll tell us what's going on and where this goes from here next. It was just 5 days ago that the U.S. Department of Education determined that 4 Kansas school districts, KCK, Olathe, Shawnee Mission, and Topeka, have policies that violate the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. The department's Office for Civil Rights also concluded that the districts violated Title IX and of the Education Amendments of 1972. This came down on Friday, and there were a couple of news stories about it over the weekend into Monday, and then it just kind of died on the vine of Kansas City news media. So there's more that's going to be happening here. Olathe is the only one that I've seen publicly respond and basically say that it's a nothing burger. That's been more or less the response from Olathe. But Paul Zimmerman is attorney with the Defense of Freedom Institute. He's been following this case, and he's on KCMO. Paul, good morning. Thank you for being here. So what is, first off, your understanding of these allegations and what they're claiming these school districts did or did not do?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. My understanding is that these districts have had policies in the past years that have violated parental rights by requiring school staff to keep from parents the fact of their children's gender transitions at school. And the Kansas Attorney General wrote a letter to these school districts notifying them of these policies and saying that they were in violation of parental rights. My organization, the Defense of Freedom Institute, filed a complaint with the Department of Education over those policies. Essentially, what we said is that they violate the parents' rights to access their kids' education records, basically by requiring school staff to just keep this information from parents. Education Department took up that complaint, launched an investigation last year, and now they've come out with their findings, which validate the Kansas Attorney General and our complaints, and have set the current events in motion in these districts.
Okay, now Olathe schools denied having or implementing policies which violate federal or state laws. The district said in a statement that the Department of Education's latest press releases include several inaccuracies. The district does not have a policy allowing students to use restrooms, locker rooms, and changing rooms based on gender identity. They say that they have been in compliance and will continue to comply with all state and federal laws, while also contributing to safeguarding the rights of all students, parents, and guardians. So does Olathe have a leg to stand on here, or do you think that there's some nuance to this and how it plays out?
So I'd say two things in response to that. One is that the Department of Education found that Olathe had actually been allowing students to use restrooms based on their asserted gender identity at school rather than their sex. And Olathe has not provided the kind of information that the Department of Education has been seeking regarding those policies or regarding its policies on keeping information from parents. And that's what the Education Department said in its response to the investigation to Olathe. The second thing is that I think what we have here and what is very concerning here is we have school districts that have these policies, these gender identity policies, that they are not publicly putting out there on their websites. And so they can say, so we found through another organization's FOIA requests and through the Kansas Attorney General's actions that they had these policies from a few years ago. Perhaps they have changed these policies, and that would be great if they did, if they provided parents with their right to access their kids' education records. But we don't know because they have not been forthcoming with these policies. They don't post them in a public-facing part of their website. And so that's the concerning thing, is that parents don't know about these policies. The Education Department is trying to get more information on them, and they just haven't been forthcoming with them.
So from your perspective, because I believe you, first off, how have you been involved in this, Paul, and like what's going to be next for the Defense of Freedom Institute as you guys fight this case?
Yeah, we have filed the complaint in this case. We essentially notified the department's Student Privacy Policy Office and its Office for Civil Rights about these policies that we were able to find on the district's websites. And so we launched, we put the gears in motion, so to speak, at the education department. Now the education department has taken hold of this, and I think that they will be very aggressive in ensuring that parental rights are respected. What they're going to do is, and I think they've already done this, they've offered a resolution agreement to these districts where the districts can change their policies. They can pledge that they're not going to violate parental rights and students' rights through Title IX. And the education department is going to monitor this. If the school districts decide that they are not going to cooperate with these investigations, as I think Shawnee Mission seems to be primed to do, maybe less so Olathe, then the education department can start the process of withholding federal funding from these districts. It can pursue other remedies like turn it over to the Department of Justice to decide whether to take these school districts to court. So the department has some options here that they will be pursuing if the districts don't cooperate.
I was going to say, what can these districts do like right now to put this thing to bed and just move on? Is there something super obvious and super simple outside of Olathe just saying that there's several inaccuracies in the allegations?
I think that the school boards could convene and write new policies that ensure that parents are at the heart of communications about gender transitions, that they know that these things are happening. And I think the administrators could take immediate action by putting out their public a public statement or public policy of the school district saying this is not, schools do not withhold this information from parents. I think that they could immediately put this to bed by doing that, and then work with the education department to ensure that those policies are actually being put in practice in the district.
Now, when you look at the timeline here, Paul, where does this go timeline-wise when it comes to what is next and all this? Because I think for a lot of people involved, they probably, well, at least those involved with some of the school districts, they just want to sweep this thing under the rug and have it go away. So what's like a timeline that we should be watching out for here?
I think in the next few months, if the districts are not cooperating, or some of those districts are not cooperating, we could see the department start a process of withholding federal funding from the districts. And then we could see in the next couple of months the department officially turn things over to the Department of Justice. And that's just for districts that are that refuse to accept the resolution agreements. The other way that things could go is that they could immediately accept the Department of Education's proposed resolution of this. And then they would be under monitoring for a certain amount of time. I think that would be within a few years, and the department could make sure that the district is actually carrying out those resolutions. So
right.
I think it could go one of those two ways.
Well, we'll be watching. I know you'll be following, and you'll be on it at the Defense of Freedom Institute. Paul Zimmerman, attorney with the organization on KCMO. Thanks for the time, Paul. Always appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Good stuff there. I just feel like this story was dropped on a Friday, got a little bit of traction over the weekend. Like I said, when TV news doesn't want to really cover a story, you can click on the story on the website, and when there's no embedded video attached to the story tied to one of the reporters, you know that they're just doing it because they feel like they have to, but they don't actually want to dig into the story. And this is a great example of that. Perfect example. They did nothing with this the last few days. And to me, it's a big deal when you look at what's going on in some of these top Kansas public school systems. All right, the Royals have put out the official statement on their plans for today. The press conference is 45 minutes away. There was one thing here that stood out to me above the rest. As the headline reads, Royals and Hallmark Cards unveil landmark plan to bring Major League Baseball downtown. It's a lot of what you would expect. I don't really have a problem with how this was rolled out at all, except for one specific part of the press release. I'll share it with you next on KCMO.
Coming up at 10 o'clock, it's Uncanceled on KCMO Talk Radio, right after Pete Mundo and Mundo in the Morning.
Statement out here in the last half hour. Royals and Hallmark Cards unveil landmark plan to bring Major League Baseball downtown. There's a part of this statement that is beyond egregious. I'll get to it, but just some of the details first. A world-class ballpark surrounded by mixed-use development and reimagined headquarters for both iconic institutions at Crown Center, that being the Royals and Hallmark Cards, would create more than 20,000 jobs in the construction phase alone. Oh, my God. That right there is just, you might think it's petty of me to be bothered by that, but it's such nonsense. So wait, the Chiefs Stadium's 20,000 jobs. This is going to be 20,000 jobs. Where are these 40,000 construction jobs coming from? When in Los Angeles, to build the SoFi Stadium was about 15,000 jobs in a metroplex that's 7 times the size of Kansas City. Tell me, I mean, once again, I don't mind goosing the numbers a little bit here. I get that's like part of the game. I'm totally fine with that. I'm accepting of that to a point. But please, with the 20,000. It's just the same number the Chiefs threw out there, 20,000, whatever. And they're temporary jobs, by the way. So like when the mayor puts in his statement, hey, all these jobs, they're temp jobs. I mean, they are. The 85-acre development surrounding a park-like central square with fountains has little, if any, precedent worldwide for a professional sports project, and the expected private investment of $2 billion or more would be the largest in Kansas City history. So that's some new news. Private investment of $2 billion. If you figure the stadium's 1.9, the city's kicking in $600 million. Let's say the state gets to about that number. Let's say it's 600, just to give you a round number. So that's a third from the city, the state, and then the team. And then you would have another $1.5 billion in private investment away from the ballpark itself. And that is a number I heard from somebody involved with the team a couple of weeks ago. They told me about a $3.5 billion number. And I said, well, that has not been reported anywhere. And I think that this person with the Royals realized that they gave me maybe too much information, but at least that makes sense when you get to $2 billion. So you get about a third of the stadium kicked in by the team, and then they would stack up another $1.5 billion in private investment to get to that $2 billion number. So that's probably what you're looking at here, all in $3.5 billion, and the stadium being funded partially by the city and then partially by the state, which of course is you, but that's how it gets framed. So the statement goes on to note here, there's a quote from John Sherman. There's a quote from Don Hall Jr., chairman of the board of directors with Hallmark Cards. And there's also a statement from Mike Kehoe, who's going to be there at 10 o'clock, and then Mayor Lucas. So here's the part that just kind of sent me off the ledge here a little bit. Because my goal from day one has just been to get what I think is a fair deal for everybody. That's the team, the city, the state, the taxpayer, and also just be honest about, how a lot of people who can go to games now, whether it's Chiefs games or Royals games, are going to be priced out. Whether that's season ticket holders or people going to single games, it's going to be more expensive. That's just how it is. That's part of why you build the new stadium, to make more money, charge more money for tickets, get more suites. That's the business model. And yeah, sure, that's capitalism. I'm fine with that, but just be honest about it. But this was at the very end of the statement here, and it reads as follows. Royals baseball would push from the bottom 10 in walkability among Major League Baseball teams, or would push from the bottom 10 from the bottom into the top 10 in walkability among Major League Baseball teams, lowering the cost and growing the accessibility for Kansas Cityans to enjoy and connect with their team. The insinuation there is that this new stadium will make it more affordable and allow more people to go to games. That's just BS. It's going to be less affordable. Now, you might say that's fine. I'm willing to pay more and pay a premium for a new ballpark, and the plan's great, and this is going to be really good. That's totally fine. But please, don't sit here and act like you're doing this as a charity. You're not doing it for charity. It's not going to be cheaper all in. Now, if you live, let's say, in River Market, and instead of driving to a game and paying $20 to park, you can take a streetcar. Okay, it will be cheaper to transport yourself from point A to point B. But your tickets are probably going to be more expensive. So are you actually really saving money? And that's how people look at spending money, and that's how they look at saving money, right? What does it cost me all in? You don't look at it and say to yourself, well, the parking was cheaper, but I spent more on the tickets, so I saved money. Like no one budgets that way or talks about money like that. It's not how it goes. And growing accessibility for Kansas Cityans to enjoy and connect with their team, I don't know like what that means. Do you mean people with disabilities? Do you mean low-income people? Are there going to be a section of tickets for like low-income folks, like kind of like low-income housing? There's going to be a low-income section in the stadium. What does that mean? Growing the accessibility. Is it going to magically transform east of 71 Highway because you'll be a mile down the road? I don't think so. It's not going to do squat for that part of Kansas City. It's not. Not going to really gentrify some of those parts of Kansas City because unless you magically have the crime disappear, which you get a mile down the road, I don't think much is going to change. Then what are we talking about? So I get it. There's politics that goes into these statements, but you got to also be able to sniff out some of the BS. And that right there, regardless of the project itself, that is not, you don't need to just sniff. That is a waft of BS that you smell the second you walk into the room. That's what that is. 913-408-7957. That's the studio line and the text line here on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM. The press conference is coming up at 10 o'clock. Keatsman will get you all the latest when that comes down later this morning. The caller of the day. We'll get to that on what has been a busy Wednesday right here on 95.7 FM.
Vince Colonnese here, and I'm coming up at 11 after Kevin Keatsman on 95.7 FM KCMO Talk Radio.
9:35, 25 minutes until the press conference taking place. John Sherman, Mike Kehoe, Quinton Lucas getting set to announce the Royals' plans for a new ballpark, which will be a partnership between Hallmark Cards and the Kansas City Royals. So, I do think the concept is pretty cool. Like, just stripping everything else out of it and some of the criticism that I think is completely fair, I do believe that the concept is pretty cool. And the concept beats out the concept from 2 years ago that was proposed at the Crossroads District. I thought that location would have been better to tie into Power and Light and T-Mobile and the parking options around there that already exist. Ingress, egress, I think, could have been easier to figure out than what this is going to be at this location. But the idea of two Kansas City institutions coming together on this project is pretty neat. And I'm intrigued to see what exactly the development around it is going to look like when you talk about $2 billion getting invested. Like, I have a lot of this that I think I am and will continue to be complimentary of. But then there's also, I think, a lot that can be fairly criticized. So, we'll see what happens today. And we'll have on Mayor Lucas tomorrow at 7:30 in his usual Thursday slot. And then we'll also have on Governor Mike Kehoe just after 8 o'clock. And we won't just talk to the governor about the stadium, because also we now know that Missouri is going to have an income tax proposal on the ballot to eliminate it. It would be a phase out of the income tax over time based on revenue goals. So they would do it much better than Kansas did it and smarter than Kansas did it. They wouldn't make the mistakes of Kansas, where you just wipe it down to zero and then pray and hope that people show up. They would say, certain things will trigger a decrease in the income tax rate, and they would have to replace that, obviously, with a sales tax, or at least increase the sales tax somewhere to make up some of the monies. That's how it would go. The question right now is, when does it go on the ballot? November or August? If I'm Kehoe, I put it on the ballot in August, because like every ballot issue, like we saw in Virginia last night, Democrats will spend a ton of money to fight it. We saw that with the abortion issue here in Missouri a couple of years ago. We saw it in Kansas with the value of them both a few years ago. We saw it last night in Virginia. On ballot issues, Democrats have an unlimited amount of money. And if you put it on the ballot in August, if you're Kehoe, what that does is it gives your opponents less runway to raise money and bring awareness. If you wait till November, you give them more time to bring awareness and raise money to fight your issue. So if you really want this thing to pass, I think August is your best bet if you're the governor of Missouri. But we'll talk to him about that and more coming up tomorrow. In the meantime, our caller of the day, speaking of Virginia, they gerrymandered their map in what is now, I would say, the worst gerrymander in the state. Virginia had a 6-5 Democrat to Republican map. They now have a 10-1 map after the vote yesterday passed by only 1.5 points. It was like 51-7 to 49-3 or something like that. It was super close. And considering that the yes side, the Democrat side, outspent the no side 4-1, 32 million to 8 million. That's a pretty darn tight race. But here is our caller of the day.
It's the Mundo in the Morning Caller of the Day on 95.7 FM KCMO Talk Radio.
Good morning. This is a frustrating thing. The Democrats have been playing dirty politics, and I know both sides have done it. But they've been doing a better job of it for over 150 years. And even though we took the House for the first time in decades and decades back under Newt Gingrich and got something done, we still haven't figured out how to play the game to the best of their ability. And what's made it worse is they have allowed our adversaries to corrupt the system. And the last question my wife asked me as we fell asleep last night was, are you really concerned or worried about our country? And I just answered yes. It is. It's disturbing. We really have to get on the game. Republicans do not get out in the numbers that we should. I mean, for crying out loud, there's just as many of us as there are of them. And then you have the independents that are reasonably minded, they're just not getting a good enough reason to vote for Republicans
Well, listen,
because
couple
it's the
of things.
uniparty.
Couple of things. Republicans, the no side was outspent 4-1, 32 million versus 8 million. And let's be clear, Republicans came up with the idea of mid-decade redistricting. They started this round of this fight, and then in Virginia, the RNC spent $0.
Well,
Zero.
there you go. We didn't spend the money.
Losers.
That's part of
Absolute
it.
losers. All right? I mean, scream about the
100%.
absolute, utter losers.
Well, look at what we got. We got rid of McConnell, and we turned around and got Thune.
That was Victor in Parkville on KCMO, our caller of the day. So that's where my frustration is with the Republicans, because the second that you kind of open up this can of worms. Now, Guy Benson made a point, which is fair. He said New York kind of first started the mid-census redistricting, and I guess that would have been late 22, right? Or maybe late 22, and then they did it again in February of 24 after a few court battles. So he's right to note that. That's a fair point. But, the big thing that got a lot of attention was Texas. And I didn't mind it. I didn't, because Texas was undercounted, first off. And on top of that, it was a more balanced approach to what Texas currently is. Texas is going to be a 30 Republican, 8 Democrat map. That's about what it's going to be, right? Now, that's a little bit more than maybe Republican representation based on the voter rolls, but it's not far off. 78% to 22%. What you're doing now in Virginia, in like a 53-47 state, is take it 91% in the congressional map for Democrats and 9% for the GOP. That's wild. But where the Republicans never think ahead is, boy, how are they going to respond to this? Because the Democrats never just sit back and take it. They never do. So how are they going to respond to it? And what is our plan for when they try to do this in fill-in-the-blank state? Instead, it was like, well, let's try to get Missouri to flip a seat. Okay, they did that with Cleaver. Let's try to get Kansas to do it. That was always going to be an uphill battle because you've got a Democratic governor. Indiana, can they flip a seat or two? And then it's like Virginia says, hold my beer, and they just go to absolute town. And the Republicans seem to not really think that this was possible, not anticipate it, and then even when it became obvious, not find the money to spend on it. Peter Thiel kicked in $2.5 million at the very end on this deal out of Silicon Valley. But at that point, it was all baked into the cake. I mean, Guy Benson said this morning on the show, which if you missed it, you can listen to on the podcast afterwards, he was seeing ads during the Winter Olympics. The freaking Winter Olympics. That's 10 weeks ago he's been seeing ads. So, I mean, that's just, it's not even close. So to have this thing be a 1.5 margin is a testament to the people of Virginia who weren't buying it. They did show up. They showed up, more people obviously showing up on the no side than showing up for President Trump, just based on the numbers. And this is what you have to show for it in the GOP. Nothing. The RNC did not spend $1 on this race. I saw some people on social media who were like talking about the RNC's cash on hand yesterday, and they were implying that, well, the Republicans are in good shape for the midterms because of the amount of cash on hand they have to run these races. Here was the post yesterday. The RNC has $116 million cash on hand per the recent FEC filings. The DNC has $14 million. And some people on the right were sharing this as like a flex. And I'm looking at that and I'm saying, okay, you've got $117 million cash on hand and you couldn't find a few $1,000,000 to go spend in Virginia to try to save the House, potentially? That's not the flex you think it is. Wow, great. The DNC has only $14 million cash on hand. You have $117 and you didn't spend $1 in Virginia? It's like the person who wants to die with $100 million in the bank and brag about it. What are you doing with the money? What are you going to put it in your casket? You can't do anything with it. You can't take it to the grave. Have a plan. The RNC has no plan. But here's the worst part. keep the grave analogy going. They're digging their own grave while they sit with the cash on hand. Way to go, guys. Way to go. We'll wrap up the show with you, 913-408-7957. And we haven't actually talked about this. I wanted to get to it. When the news came out yesterday on this salacious story, I thought, oh, this will be great. And then, of course, the news kind of went wild here in town over the last 24 hours with the stadium news and everything else. And then Virginia happened. So I haven't even gotten to this yet. We'll wrap up the show with the admission, not admission, coming up next.
From Lenexa to Lee Summit, you're listening to Mundo in the Morning on 95.7 FM, KCMO Talk Radio.
Wrapping up the show, just saw some photos from down at Crown Center. Our good friend Matt Fleener, Channel 9, KMBC, is down there, and he is posting some social media photos, and it looks like it is going to be quite the rollout, similar to what you saw in Kansas back in December on the announcement for the Chiefs. So, if nothing else, it will be very intriguing to see what that looks like. And I'm interested in the details. That's what I hope. I really think the Royals owe it to forget the city. They owe it to the taxpayer to say, here's what we're going to do. This is how we're reimagining Crown Center. And this is why we think it can be beneficial to not just Kansas City, but, the entire region. So I hope we get some details. Patrick Touhey said last hour he's not convinced of that because he had heard a rumor, and I can't confirm or deny it, but he heard a rumor that basically the ballpark moved at the very last minute from Washington Square Park to Crown Center because of the National Railroad Act or something, being too close to the railroad there at Union Station. So hopefully it's not just a lot of backslapping and not a lot of detail. I hope we get some more, and we'll see how it plays out. As we get set for the NFL draft tomorrow, and that's happening in Pittsburgh, big night for the Chiefs to kind of hit the reset button on what could be the second half of Patrick Mahomes' prime, I guess you would call this, and what that looks like will be in large part determined by how this draft goes coming up this weekend. There's this overriding scandal involving Patriots head coach Mike Vrabel and former athletic reporter Diana Rossini. They're both married. They were both caught in pictures a couple of weeks ago on a rooftop in Sedona, poolside, holding hands, hugging, the whole thing. She has since quit her job at The Athletic, and this was happening while she was under investigation by her employer. The Athletic is owned by the New York Times. And Vrabel, he's the head coach of the Patriots. They just played in the Super Bowl. He's not going anywhere. But Vrabel did address this yesterday for the first time. So, Mark, if we could play some of the Patriots head coach, let's take a listen to what Mike Vrabel had to say.
First, begin by saying thank you. Thank you for your patience that you've shown in a personal and private matter for me and obviously everybody involved. I know that that's not easy for you, and I respect that, and I appreciate your efforts in doing so. I understand I could have, addressed you guys sooner, but it was important to me to have a conversation with the players, which I did yesterday, very candidly, as we began our off-season program, which everyone is excited to be a part of. Stacy had mentioned the players' availability, and it was never my intention to have them speak to you or address you before I did. And so I asked him to come today and to talk with you. I also don't want to take away from our, the draft, the weekend of the draft. This is an important time for us, our organization, and the excitement and the joy that those players are going to have that we bring onto our football team. They're starting an amazing journey, one that should be celebrated as we welcome them onto our team. With that being said, I've had some difficult conversations with people that I care about, with my family, the organization, the coaches, the players. Those have been positive and productive. We believe in order to be successful on and off the field, you have to make good decisions. That includes me, that starts with me. We never want our actions to negatively affect the team.
Okay, hold on. All right, stop. That's enough of Mike Vrabel. Mike Vrabel basically just admitted it without admitting it. Mike Vrabel admitted to an inappropriate relationship with, I guess now former NFL reporter Diana Rossini, without just saying it. Now remember what Mike Vrabel said back on April 7th. He said about the photos that came out with him and Diana Rossini on the rooftop in Sedona, Arizona. He said these photos show a completely innocent interaction and any suggestion otherwise is laughable. This doesn't deserve any further response. That's what he said 2 weeks ago.
Well, they thought they could sweep it under the rug.
I guess. I mean, I don't take any joy or pleasure in this. I feel terrible for his family. Diana Rossini lost a job over it. I mean, Vrabel's going to be fine career-wise. But to say that these photos show a completely innocent interaction, Mark, if your wife found a photo of you doing what Mike Vrabel was doing, even though there was like no kiss or something like that, let's be honest, man, you're screwed, okay? And any dude is screwed with those photos.
Oh, yeah.
No guy holds hands like that and hugs a woman who he doesn't have some kind of physical relationship with. I mean, everyone sniffed that thing out right away, even though there was no moment of them, locking lips or sucking face or anything of that nature. It was so obvious. You don't have a smile on your face and hold hands and hug and do all that stuff with a woman that, you're just in a professional friendship with. That's crazy. And everybody with 2 ounces of common sense knew that right away. So Vrabel came out, tried to obviously get this over with and just move on. The timing was probably the best timing possible right before the NFL draft. The news cycle will move very quickly. I don't know what happens to Diana Rossini's career. I really don't. And for people who say it's all about sexism, I also do not buy that at all. She's the reporter covering him. There's always more leeway in sports. If you're great at what you do, you can get away with a lot. Don't have to like it, but that's more about sports than it is about male versus female. And she's the one who technically is supposed to be the unbiased reporter covering these guys. I don't know how she could go back and do her job now, at least not for The Athletic. With Vrabel, he can go back and do his job and just say to his guys, yeah, screwed up, sorry. I mean, it doesn't change inherently what he has to do to be successful at his job. It does for her. And that's not about sexism. That's just about the roles and the needs of each of those positions. That's what this is really about. We'll do some NFL draft preview stuff tomorrow for the Chiefs. They have, 2 first-round picks, right? So it's going to be a big night.
9th and 29th.
9th and 29th. Going to be a big night here for the Chiefs to figure out what the second half of Patrick Mahomes' career is going to look like. We'll talk about it tomorrow with Kevin Keatsman. We'll also have on Quentin Lucas and Mike Kehoe as well. The big stadium announcement is moments away. And so is Keatsman Uncanceled. Have a great rest of your Wednesday.